Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm going to give a few more minutes for people to get in here, and we'll get started. Greetings, everyone that messaged in chat already. Some familiar faces, some not. How's it going, Roberto? Hey, Colin. I would go through and specifically say hi to everyone, but that seems a little excessive. Just going to give it a few more minutes. Also, Roberto, I had no idea you had a separate Instagram for your photography, so I'm sorry for linking the wrong one. Whoops. Good afternoon. Day has been good so far. I think this is the earliest stream I've done. Curious to see how it'll go, considering we have a little bit more people from Europe, I think. All right, probably just going to give it one more minute, and then we'll jump into Lightroom and start taking a look at some of the photos. I got a decent amount of submissions, so. Gotcha. Well, 11 p.m. is not the worst. It is not snowing. It was supposed to snow on Thursday, but I don't think we're going to get any snow. Hey, JK. Welcome. Yeah, Roberto, I can start with you. All right. Let's get started. Hopefully I have everything set up right. These are all the submissions I got. Quite a few edits and non-edits. So after we do Roberto's, I will just see who's in the chat to see, you guys can just tell me a number and we can go from there to see what you might want to edit. Also, let me know if the music ever gets too crazy. It's difficult for me to hear. So the issue that I have is I'm controlling the volume that you guys are hearing, but I don't control the volume that you guys are hearing on my speakers. So I have to try to match it. So that's why I'm always wondering if it sounds okay. So if it's too loud or anything, just let me know. Okay. Let's go to metadata here. I think I got everyone's name in here correctly. And if you don't see your name, I saw some people didn't include their Instagram or anything. Just feel free to say something. Let's see. Roberto. All right. So Roberto sent in 2 images, one that was edited and one that was not edited. And we'll just start with the one that he sent in that was edited. I think it's a pretty cool image. Roberto, if you want to tell your story about it or retype what you sent me in the message, you can. So the one thing I noticed about this is that I was actually thinking about this in the shower today about gear and how people always say gear doesn't matter. You can take really great photos regardless of the gear. And I want to use you as an example because I think this is a prime example that you took this photo on a Rebel T6, which is, 11 years old at this point? 10 years old? No, not that old. But the sensor in it's pretty old. It's a pretty older camera. And then this picture that you sent me to edit, you took on a EOS RP, which is relatively new. And I think it's safe to say, obviously this is unedited, but I think it's safe to say that in terms of the actual photo composition and things like that, this is far more interesting in my opinion. And it really didn't matter what camera you took it on. I will say, when I looked at this image, you could definitely see the aging sensor if I zoom in. The amount of, because we're at ISO 200, and I assume you had to push these shadows pretty hard to the point where, you know, they look a little grainy. I don't know if it's going to come through on YouTube or not. But that is the kind of thing where obviously upgrading your camera can really make a difference. But at the end of the day, what's really interesting, and I know I'm not talking about your photo yet, but just let me keep rambling, is that a lot of people are going to consume this image at like this size or this size. And they're never really going to see what camera you took it on or anything like that. And that's why I've always been a big proponent that you can learn on anything. Yeah. Yeah, I know it's I can tell it's tough to photograph, but I have to imagine that if you were shooting this on your newer camera, it would be a lot easier to actually bring out a lot of the details and edit, and you wouldn't need the conditions to be as what they were. And I just think it's really interesting, and it's cool that we started with you, because I thought it was a cool comparison to compare a newer camera with an older camera. But I think this picture you sent, that you've obviously, you know, went and captured this composition and waited for the right light, and it really mattered what your actual shot was. Well, why didn't you send me that one, Roberto? I could have done this one and then edited the one you sent with the newer camera. I'm just kidding. But thank you for letting me use you as an example. I think that's pretty cool to think about. Okay, so critique. I did not mean to do that. Critique-wise, there's not a whole lot to say about the image. I think you probably, in terms of editing and stuff, you pushed it about as far as you could, I think. So if we really zoom in here, you can see, and it might not come through on YouTube, but the one thing that I noticed is that this area looks like it's not, and I don't know if it's from your editing, but this area doesn't look like, it looks a little shaky, but I don't know why. Maybe you can tell me in terms of the image. Obviously that zoom is 300%, which is going to really make it super grainy. And you sent me a compressed JPEG, so. Yeah, so let's say I have your raw file right here, and I do a bunch of edits to it. If I right click the raw file and go to metadata and click save metadata to file, it should save your edit to it. Or you can export in DNG. But you should be able to save the metadata this way, and I think it will have your edit on there. Anyways, I think this is a great shot. I don't really have a lot of critique about it. I think that you pretty much did exactly what you wanted to do. I will say the only thing I noticed is just absolutely making sure your lines are lined up. So like obviously this plane is lined up well. And these rows of light are lined up well. And you have the frame perfectly in the middle of this box. Those are the kind of things I would look for in a photo like this. But I think you did it really well. Okay, sounds good, Roberto. All right, so let's take a look really quick at your other image you sent me. So I don't necessarily know if I'm going to have time to edit this fully, but we can take a look at it. So this is a 13-second exposure, so that's obviously what's giving us this effect on the water here. There's a bridge in the background. There's some people sitting here that actually aren't that blurry. Are the people on purpose? Yeah, anytime, Roberto. Unless you were talking. Yeah, made up. I think that graininess is just from compression, sharpness on a smaller pixel sensor, and I zoomed in a lot. I don't really think it's anything bad. Oh, I got a donation. Thank you, JK. Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, there's a link in the description down below and you can just click that. And I think there's a bunch of ways to donate if you feel up to it. Also, if you happen to be here and really want your photo to be looked at, I obviously would not be able to turn down someone donating and looking at their photo. So if you feel inclined, no pressure though. I really mostly just appreciate you guys being here and chatting. That's what makes the difference for me. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Let's talk about balance in this photo. I think you have a lot of, so before I edit it, if I am going to fully edit, I think this photo probably needs a decent amount of editing, but I think we'll talk about compositional balance because I feel like this is really close. And I say that because it has all the elements of things that you want in a photo. You've got this foreground element of rocks that leads your eye to the background here of these people. You've got the sun over here on the left. But I think the actual original image is just slightly unbalanced. And what I mean by that is the weight of the leading line here is pretty far to the right, and the sun over here is pretty far to the left. So what I'm trying to say is if the people and the sun had that gap between the two had kind of just was slightly less, I think this part of the image would look better. And I know that might be hard to understand. And sometimes talking about composition is very subjective. Again, I think all of the elements are here, and I think it's very good groundwork for a solid composition. But I feel like I want these people to be just, or the rocks to be just a little bit more in frame. And I know you were trying to balance the sun over here. Or if the sun was just a little bit to the right, I think it would balance even more. I just feel like there's just a slight lack of continuation right into the middle of the frame, if that makes sense, Roberto. So something we could do to possibly fix that. Now, you obviously have these people right in your rule of thirds line, which is great. But again, when I immediately look at this, there just feels like there's something off about the balance. And if we just completely remove the sun and almost did something like this to me feels better. And I know that might be weird considering we just cut off the sun. But this balance of going to like off the frame with these rocks to where these people are right in the middle, this particular crop feels better to me in terms of composition. Now, again, that's a subjective thing. Other people might want to cue in and provide their ideas. But in terms of just looking at it compositionally, I think that something like this, to where the people are exactly what my eye is led to. Yeah. Yeah. But again, I know what you were trying to do. You wanted the sun in here to balance the people on this side of the image. I totally get it. And the bridge is so tiny that it is obviously hard to see. So I don't even notice it. To be honest, it's so small, it's almost more distracting than it is something that I really see. Okay, but let's do a quick edit on this. Now, let me check sharpness in terms of the image. We're at about 100% here. And you're shooting at, oh. Thank you, Bane. Whoever you may be. That donation is far too kind, but thank you. And if you have an image, let me know which one. So it looks like you're shooting at f/16, which is great for focus, and you're not going to have, oh God, I'm blanking on what it's called when you go over f/16. Anyone in the chat remember what it's called? Basically, you lose sharpness once you go over a certain amount, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head right this second. Diffraction, yeah, that's it. Thank you. Yeah. Sometimes brain fart. All right, Roberto, you don't count. You're too late. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is just add some contrast in. I'm going to probably bring the shadows up I'm going to bring down the sky a bit. And I don't necessarily have like a workflow method, especially when I'm approaching other people's images, because at least when I approach my own images, I know kind of what it looked like when I was there. So I kind of just have to go off with whatever is given to me here. So something you're going to notice if I do this is that this part of the image is going to be a little too bright. So maybe that's not a good idea since this whole part of the image is too bright. Maybe a better idea is to create a graduated filter going left to right, bring down those exposures. Something. Now this is going to take some balance, but also this is going to be very dependent on the camera you're shooting on in terms of how much I can recover here. So I think that's looking pretty even, although it's looking a little dark here. So I need to come over a little bit until it starts to look a little more even. This is going to be a tough balance. I don't think that looks terrible. Looks a little bit better. Let's go over here and adjust the profile to landscape. And I think I wanted to warm it up a little bit. I think that's looking a lot better. Let's go back. Strong contrast. Let's see. Let's check the blue saturation slider, see if it does anything that we want it to. I think it's adding a little bit of tonal light on the rocks, which is nice. So what I'm going to do is bump this up some, but then I'm definitely going to bring down the blue saturation a little bit here in the HSL. I'm going to bring down the total saturation here by about 5 or 10. Okay. So I'm curious. The one thing that is tough about this image is that the original image is pretty flat. Now, obviously, there's a huge tonal range in terms of like this is super bright and these are super dark. But condition-wise, there's just not a lot of tonal light on what's going on in the rocks down here. So I think this is looking okay. I think if I were to continue to edit this, maybe I would do what I would probably do is darken the whole thing, maybe like this, take it into Photoshop, and then paint in some light on some of these rocks using a separate exposure. And that's probably what I do if I spent a bunch of time on this. But I think overall and Roberto, don't feel offended by me saying this, I think overall it just lacks some of the light that I would want naturally on these rocks. And because it feels like there's just so much haze and stuff that's going on in the sky. Yeah, I think if I took more time, I would spend time painting these rocks. But here's my issue again, is that I either want to crop this photo like this, and I want more rocks in the foreground, or I just want to crop the photo like this. And I know that kind of defeats the purpose of the photo, because here's the issue, is if I crop the photo like this, and I want my subject to be here on these people, we're going to have to go create a radial filter. And this is just for example's sake. And I'm going to bump this up, but then I'm going to range mask it. Oh, I'm going the opposite way. Just something like this. Let's bring up the shadows. Okay, need a bigger range mask. Still need a bigger range mask. Okay, let's see what that's doing. Don't want it to look too overblown. But I feel like something like this, the problem, again, is that I've now cropped out a lot of where the brightest parts of the image are. And now we have this bright rock down here that's kind of distracting. But it goes against what you were trying to do with the photo, which is have all these nice tones here. I think in the future, what I would try to do is figure out, like I get the idea here, But again, it comes back to the balance of the photo. The bright parts of the image are down here where the rocks are, and these are kind of off frame, like they're too close to the edge of the frame. So if I were to go back and take this again, I might take 2 shots where I take just this shot like this, where all that nice sunlight is coming and hitting those rocks, back up a little bit and get these rocks kind of here in the frame, and then take that shot, and then take the shot that you're trying to take here with a little bit more cautious, not cautious, but a little bit more thought into placing these people and the sun to balance it more with the rocks. I hope that makes sense. And again, a lot of the stuff I'm saying is very subjective. I just think that part of the image you have bright spots that lead my eye to this area, but then you have subject matter and leading lines that lead my eye to this area. And there's only so much you can do to brighten these people up, right? So if I were to come in and crop this really tight here, something like maybe much tighter than it was. Let's see how this looks. If I were to do something like this, and then give more, and again, it's going to be difficult because there's only so much data we have to work with here. Just brighten up that part ever so slightly, a little bit more. I'm going to make this even bigger. I don't think that looks good. See, I think this particular composition and look is just so much stronger for the overall photo. But I hope that makes sense, Roberto. I think, again, everything that was here in terms of your original image is good. I just think because of the way the light fell onto your scene, a lot of this stuff is interesting, but then I want to look this way because of how the composition is done. So I hope that makes sense. All right. Yeah, of course. Thank you, Ben. And if I missed something you guys said in chats, Adam, let me read what you said. So he shot with a longer exposure, very likely to get some of this mist looking feel here if the waves weren't moving that much, like he said. And I think that was the idea. But you can see even in my edit here, a lot of this water looks a little bit muddy now. I wouldn't necessarily say this is a great edit, but if we go back to the original, the water is, even in the original, the contrast between this little area and this area is so huge that it would be difficult to work with. Which is why I said if I really wanted to take the time, I think taking this into Photoshop and doing some luminance masking would do well. But Roberto, I hope that helps. I think in the future, both shots you've sent me from your seascape stuff, you're always trying to take the sun into the shot. I think next time, try to take some shots that don't have the sun in them and just see what you come up with. Like, just forget the sun. Just try to shoot something else without the sun in it and then go from there. And just see how it works out. You can still take the shots with the sun in it, but try to take some without it and see what happens. Because I think overall, this image and the one you sent me in the last critique both tried to overuse the sun as a compositional element, if that makes sense. No, yeah, of course. And I'm freely talking to you in the sense that I hope what I'm saying is comes off as more of a lesson rather than you did something wrong, because that's totally not it. All right, let's head back to all our images. I got 34 submissions. Let me check And if you guys happen to send me emails while on the stream, if we have time, I might be able to look at those. But the process to download and sync them and then add your name in is a little bit long. It takes a few minutes per photo, depending on how people send them. Okay, so I don't know who's in the chat, but if you're in the chat and you want your photo critiqued or looked at, feel free to say a number or send me a donation to really get my attention. Again, that's not like a you have to do it thing. It's just a I will definitely try to prioritize people that send me donations just because I feel like I have to, and it's very appreciated. 68. Okay, first person said 68. Oh, Adam. Okay, Adam. I'm going to tell you right now. I was going to look at these regardless, just because of the story. All right, so we're going to look at 68 first, and let me just go up here. So the story behind this photo is very interesting. If you caught my stream last week, you'll know that we edited a few photos from me hiking up to a spot, and I got like shots of a clouded version. And that video was actually supposed to be released yesterday, but I made the quick Lightroom tutorial video because of the timeliness of that particular video and released that instead. And what's funny about these photos is that Adam did the exact same hike that I did on the exact same morning, except he made it up there in time. And I'm kind of jealous. So this is his edit. And Adam, I'm probably not going to fully edit your photo, but I did want to at least take a look and tell the story. And I thought it was really, really cool that someone that watched my channel, that I don't know if, Adam, I don't know if you caught my last stream or if you saw a post about it on my Instagram, but you were literally on the same hike as me on the same morning, and somehow we didn't pass by each other. And I think that's pretty cool. And this is the photo that, this is the photo that Adam got and sent me. And this is his edit. And I think this is the raw file, which I can definitely tell what you were working with here. This was before the sun came up. So obviously, yeah, I mean, you were ahead of me. So that means that, and I, like I said, as soon as the sun came up, I started to head back down. So that's probably why we didn't run into each other. I was feeling pretty down that day because, yeah, you'll watch the video. You'll see what I'm talking about. Hey, Sam, how's it going? All right, so because you sent me your edit, and I don't know how much else I would do. So I don't know what you were working with up there. But something I think I would have done, and again, I don't know how low you are. Let's see if I can get an idea. So you're at what, 10 millimeters here? Oh, but on XT4, so 16. Okay, so if you're at 16, so what I would have done in this composition is, I'm assuming when you took the photo, let's brighten it up a little bit so people can actually see what we're working with. I probably would have tried to get lower towards this stuff at the bottom to kind of cut this out of the frame. But again, I don't necessarily know what you were working with when you were there. Hey, Luigi, how's it going? Master Woofs, sorry about my bot is a little overzealous. I don't know what the symbols, maybe it was the dashes. I don't know. Yeah, I think that that's probably the weakest part of the composition, is that you have these branches in the top. I do like what you did when you cropped in here to remove that distracting element. The other thing about the photo is it's obviously taken completely underexposed. And I can tell that when your final edit, even though the XT4 is really good at bringing up shadows, I think you would have, obviously, I think you know this already, but this image should have been brighter because you could have recovered these highlights pretty easily. And the other thing about the image is that for me, it really lacks a subject, and I don't necessarily know what I'm supposed to look at. Obviously, I love the tones and the textures of the snow and the light hitting the snow, but I feel like overall it just kind of lacks something. It's more of a, here's a shot of what the morning looked like rather than here's a shot of something with the morning elements, if that makes sense. And like maybe this log was supposed to be, or this tree root is supposed to be the subject, but I think it's too close to the bottom right of the frame. And I think overall the brightest part of the image is obviously right here. So that's where my eye goes. And I think because you took the image too dark, recovery here in this part of the tree is probably pretty grainy, if I had to guess. Let me take a look. Yeah. It's interesting how much you can recover on the X-T4. I actually haven't shot many photos on the X-T4. I usually shoot time lapses, but they're in JPEG because I'm shooting time lapses. There's a lot of data here. I mean, this is +4, and I feel like this looks pretty cool. Just exposing by +4. But again, you're going to have to, it's going to be difficult to balance the parts that are too dark. So I think what I would do is, I released a video recently titled 5 Creative Tips for Lightroom. And I think this little tip right here is probably the easiest way to edit this photo only in Lightroom. So if you noticed when I was outside of this filter and I was just trying to bring the exposure up, let's say I wanted to bring it up by like 4 stops. It's amazing that I can even cover that much data, which is really cool. All of this ends up looking pretty close to where we want it exposure-wise, but now we've completely blown out the whites and the highlights here, and I can't really recover those that well with just these sliders. So what I would do is use the tip that I talked about in that video where you just create a graduated neutral density filter off on the side of the image so it's affecting the whole thing. And then we're just going to bring up the exposure just like we did just a second ago. Maybe something like this. And then I'm going to bring up the whites. But then I'm going to range mask the highest luminance values off. So I want to get rid of that sky. And right until it gets to the point where the sky looks good. And then I need to shift this so that hopefully the bottom half of the image is pretty much all white. It's going to be difficult. Okay, maybe this isn't going to work how I expected it to. Let's see. I mean, the problem is I'm increasing exposure by a significant amount. So what's basically happening is when I add the mask in, it's removing some of the parts of the image here, even though they're dark here. So let's see if we can find a balance really quick. And as much as I want to just put a G&D for the bottom half of the image, then the tree and stuff will, well, let's just try it because then maybe I can balance this a little bit better. So scrap what I said about putting it off screen. Let's just put it right on the horizon line. That's not perfectly level yet, but Justin, thank you for the donation. I'm sorry I missed it. Thank you so much. I don't see any note with it though, but thank you. Okay. I think we need to reverse this. All right. So here is what I'm going to try to do. So I'm thinking something like this. Something along these lines. Again, the problem I'm going to run into is now these trees are super dark. So let's try to see what we can do here. I don't really want to cut out anything because all of this stuff I want to be pretty bright. So maybe just using the graduated neutral density filter was a bad idea in the first place, because now this looks good. And, well, maybe that's not necessarily true because, so instead of using, and sorry, this might be confusing, but I'm trying to figure this out as I go. So maybe the range mask is what was pointless, and what would have made more sense is to have this graduated filter here, set the settings for the bottom half of the image, and then we create another graduated filter here for the top half of the image, and we're going to reset this. And that just gives us more control over balancing what we want to bring up for the sky and what we want to bring up for the foreground. Because again, we're working with a pretty underexposed image that we can recover the data in, but we're just trying to balance that all in the correct way. So I'm going to bring up the exposure here to bring up this top part of the image, but I'm actually going to bring down the highlights to keep these tones here. And then last but not least, we're going to add one more graduated filter, and this is going to be for the trees. And on this particular one, I think, is where we're going to use the range mask. So let's do luminance, and then I want it to only affect those trees pretty much. And let's see if we can find a balance to bring out some of the details in those trees by bringing up the shadows. Did I do it wrong here? No. I'm bringing up the exposure to see if we can get anything out of those trees. Let's just zoom in here. And I think, oh, that's when I press spacebar too much. And I think we're not going to be able to get a ton out, but I think we can get something out to just give a touch of detail there. I'm sorry I haven't checked chat in a little bit, but I think overall this is looking probably pretty close to what you did. I think this area is probably still a little too dark in my opinion. And obviously I haven't readjusted the crop. So if we were to fix the horizon line, bring down the crop, and I'm going to leave those trees in there because actually I don't mind it too much. It kind of fills in the sky. Maybe it's a little distracting, but I don't mind it all that much. And I know that your edit had more of a purple tone to it, more of a blue hour tone. But I think I'm going to just warm it up ever so slightly. And I think this is looking pretty good. And again, there's just not enough data here to really reveal what's in these trees. So what's going to happen in a photo like this, the problem is you have all this snow that's reflecting light. Meaning when I brought up those details, the data is going to be there. We have these really dark trees that have bright light behind them. And it's really, really difficult to correctly get detail into a tree like this when it's contrasted right next to a bright sky. So even though there is a little bit of detail there, we can probably bring up a little bit more. So let's go back to that G&D that I'm using for just these trees here. And you can see that it's only touching the trees when I hover over the mask. Let's try to bring up the shadows even more. But one of the problems you're gonna encounter when you're using a mask is if the mask isn't perfect, it's gonna have this weird graininess when it transitions to the sky. So I think something like this is pretty good. Maybe not that bright. But I think something like this is much better. We're getting a tiny bit of detail out of the trees, which is pretty much what we can work with. And you have a natural vignette in this because it's such a wide shot that I actually like. I think it works with the photo. So something else, let's see what this does. I don't think I'm going to want to do this because it's a Fuji camera and this works a little bit different on Fuji. And I think the colors are already pretty good. I think this is looking pretty good though for how I would edit the photo. But I think the trick for this, especially since what we started with was this, is definitely using 2 graduated filters to balance the bottom half of the photo and the top half of the photo, and then using a luminance mask on the trees. I'm going to catch up with chat. Hope that makes sense, Adam. Yeah, I think the root on the bottom right is just, in this particular crop, I don't I think it's actually better in my opinion. I think here it's too close to the edge. And I think overall, I actually think leaving these branches in the top like this to kind of give a, I don't know, you're not gonna be able to see my hand, but I'm gonna use my mouse to kind of give a swooping motion, a leading line from this part of the image up to this tree, and then this kind of closes it off. Again, it's not perfect, but I think I like it better. And again, this is just my opinion. People can chime in on chat if they want to. I think I like it better than this particular crop and edit. Something else I noticed with your edit, and it might be in the compression, is that your shadow areas down here in the behind the tree are oversaturated. They're too blue, I think. And I think that this, and again, if you want to have that color tonality that you have on the snow here, perfectly fine. But if you're going to do that, I think you have to balance those shadow areas down here a little bit more. Okay. Hope that answers your question. Well, not that you had a specific question, but it's really cool that we were at the same area at the same time. I think that's awesome. So we'll head back to the library, and I'll scroll up in chat and see who commented saying they're still here. Adam, thank you for submitting, and thank you for the story. Yeah, no worries. Thanks for submitting. I think it's really cool that we were both there. Okay. All right, let's take a look at Allison's. Allison, are you still here? Allison, I think I remember, so some people send me emails that don't have a whole lot of text. Some people send me emails with lots of text. I'm trying to remember everything that people sent me, but I believe you told me that you were new to photography. And Ralph, I guess dashes aren't allowed. I'm sorry. That's just, I don't know why. Maybe use a comma. Made up, your image is not here. If you did not submit for this critique, so if you submitted images before I posted it, I did not include those. So for example, if you submitted for the last critique, I did not include those in this. I just started fresh. So let me check my email really quick. I don't have anyone with your name on it. If you want to send it to me again, Made-Up, feel free. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why it's not here if you did send it for this particular critique. All right, so Allison, so I think the first thing we're going to approach here is, where was this taken? Just out of curiosity. I'm going to crop out this left cypress. And then what this is going to do is just kind of give us a little bit more balance to your image here. So you have this clump of cypresses on the right and this other one on the left. Whereas this one kind of distracts from the overall composition. I think that's a pretty simple crop out there. I'm going to straighten your horizon line just a little bit. And I think this crop is a little bit better. Let's give a little bit more breathing room over here on the left so that this isn't so close. Let's give it just a tad more if we can. I would be very surprised if this was Africa. Yeah, South Louisiana. Okay. So something else I'm going to do, I actually think what's going to end up happening is I think this is going to be a fantastic black and white. The reason I say that is for two things. One, there's a lot of high contrast in the image naturally. You've got a sky you can't really see. You've got a lot of dark areas in the cypresses here. You've got a lot of brightness here. You can take a look at your histogram and really get an idea of that. But the other and the biggest reason, in my opinion, is that there's really no color in here already. So I think that because there's a lack of color, it's already high contrast. This is a pretty straightforward black and white, in my opinion. So I'm going to just do that now. And I can already tell it looks a lot better, in my opinion. I'm going to bring up the shadows quite a bit, trying to balance out, getting some detail into those trees. Bring down the highlights a little bit. I'm going to come up here, create a neutral density filter, bring down the highlights a tiny bit. Now, I don't think there's any data up here, if I had to guess. Like, I don't think there's any blue sky or anything. It's just white sky. So we're not going to have a whole lot to bring down there. And I don't want it to look too mushy. So I'm just going to ever so slightly bring down the highlights a little bit more here. And then let's see what happens when we change the white balance of our image. Sometimes I like to just play around with this. And this was also in one of the most recent videos I did, to see how it affects the black and white image. In this particular image, like I said, there's not a whole lot of color, so it's not doing a ton. I think overall this is probably close to how I would edit it. I'd probably bring up some clarity, maybe some texture a little bit. And that's really just going to help bring out the details in these cypresses that are in the foreground. I think overall it's probably a little bit too busy. And that if you wanted to, something that cool you could do is just crop into something like this. And this gives you a little bit more, it's still busy, but it doesn't feel as busy. It gives you a little bit more idea of what exactly you're trying to look at. I think overall though, definitely black and white. You may even need to bring up the exposure a little bit more. So something you could do is create a few big radial filters here to kind of give a touch of light on these spots. So I'm just going to ever so slightly bring these up, duplicate this, bring it over here and make it a little bit smaller. And I want to focus on the shadows here. And I could use a range mask for this, but I think just bringing up the shadows is strong enough here. I think something like this will give you an idea of where I'm going. And I think this is looking pretty good for what we started with. So Allison, I hope that helped. Give you an idea of how I would edit this photo. I will say this is not exactly how I would finish. There's more things left to be done. But I hope that gave you some ideas for how you could take it and play around with it. I definitely think it's either this crop or this particular crop, and one of those should work. But I think overall this is looking pretty good. One other thing I could do that actually might really work is create a big radial filter here, uncheck invert, big feather, and almost create like a vignette over here so that your eye kind of looks a little bit more at these cypresses in the foreground. And this is probably too strong, but I think this is looking pretty cool. So that's what I would say for this. All right, Allison, thank you for submitting, and thank you for letting me critique your image. All right, I'm going to scroll back up. Okay, actually, Greg just donated. Sorry, Greg, if I missed your donation. Wow, $25. Thank you. That is far too kind. Thank you. I legitimately speechless. I don't know what to say. Well, I guess we'll take a look at your image. Sorry. Thank you for submitting. Guys, I'll try to get to everyone's image. I'm going to stream for as long as I can so that hopefully I can get to everyone's image if you submitted one. So let's take a look at Greg's image really quick. That's not possible. I know you sent me 4 images, Greg. Hold on. Okay, 1 second. I know this is part of one. Oh, it just didn't get all the data. Okay. Thankfully, I have semi-photographic memory, and I can I can remember every image that was sent to me, and I can guess who sent it to me, weirdly enough, even though I might not remember your name. Okay, I know it was these two. Greg, it was these two as well, right? 66 and 67? Just to make sure. Oh, it's right there. Okay. Yeah, for some reason, when I put your name in for creator, it only did one of them. But there we go. These are your 4, right? These are the, well, you sent me more than that, but these are I picked these out. This is correct, yeah? 64. I have that one. Just want to confirm that this is the four of the ones you sent me, yeah? Wow, 97 people here. Welcome, guys. And if you're new here, you can feel free to subscribe to my channel. I make a lot of content, landscape photography. We do live streams every week, and every once in a while I do a user-submitted critique. Okay, great. It's been a lot of fun. So if you're new here, thank you for joining in. If you've been here for a long time, thank you for coming back. And like I said, I'll try to get to everybody's stuff. I hope you're learning from other people's stuff. Also, I just want to say this. If you ever feel like you want a one-on-one session where I edit a photo that you've taken, or you want critique on a bunch of photos or something like that, I always offer that. And you can just email me about it. So just let me know. Okay, so these are 4 images that Greg sent me. 2 of them are the edits and 2 of them are the unedited. I think I picked this one just because I really liked what you did with the edit. And I'll be completely honest, I don't know how much different I would do here, just because, again, this is what's really cool about this particular photo and why it lends itself so well to black and white is just because you have this bright sky, you have this really dull foreground, and by having this foreground be such a different contrasting color than the top part of the image, you have a lot of control over when you convert it to black and white. And there's just not a whole lot of color in this that you really care about, and it's definitely a texture style image, which I think is just important for when you're shooting in black and white. And I think this is did I hit reset on this? Yeah. So you sent me this image, and then I think you sent me this crop. And I wanted to pick one that was in color and one that wasn't. In your particular image that you sent me as the edit, one thing that I'm noticing right off the bat is I think now I can't zoom all the way in because it's compressed, but I think your shadows are a tiny bit too blue. I think overall the image is a little too blue. When I cull or selecting images, I'll be honest and say that sometimes it's a long process in terms of it can take years. And what I mean by that is, so if I'm in a location and I come home. If I'm in a location, I go back to my Airbnb or my house or whatever, and I offload the images. I'll go through them that night, and usually I'm really tired, so I don't spend a whole lot of time editing them. But I have an idea in my mind which ones probably look the best, and I'll go through and just hit, I'll star those or hit P to pick them. But then over time, over years, sometimes I'll go back to a folder and look through images and try to see them in different ways. It's something I actually might do on my next stream that I think will be on Wednesday, as I kind of want to go through some of my old catalogs and do that. So if you want, you can check that out. I don't necessarily know if it'll answer your question specifically, but all right. So yeah, I think your edit is a little too blue. Now, obviously shadows are typically blue, like you can tell in your image. But I think just warming this up, in my opinion, would probably just make it look a little bit more natural for me. I'm not saying that snow needs to be white, but I just think that there's too much blue here. So let's take a look. Again, I would love to sit here and edit this photo, but I genuinely don't think I'm going to come away with anything that's any better than how you edited this photo. So even if I converted to black and white and brought down the highlight, brought down the exposure, I guess you probably used AG&D. And then probably used a range mask, if I had to guess. Something like this. Brought down the exposure. I'm starting to think the DNG you sent me is not as, like, I can't get to, that's weird. I can't get the same, so maybe you did something like this. And then, I'm trying to figure out how you separated the clouds here with this part. Oh, DJI. Oh, is this a drone shot? I didn't even notice. So I know how you balance the foreground. That part's easy, but I'm How did you balance this part? Okay. Now I see. Okay. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Because when I was using this grad and bringing it down, it was bringing down the whole thing on this luminance mask. Okay. So that's a good tip. If you ever need to create separation between things like clouds or sky or anything like that, typically the dehaze tool is pretty powerful to add local or micro contrast to an image. Now, if I was in color here, it would make the sky too blue, but because we're in black and white, we can push it a little bit more. And what it normally will do is separate areas. So this is actually really interesting, and thank you for mentioning that, Greg, and I get to bring it up, is if I just bring the exposure down, it brings obviously the exposure for everything down. But if I increase the dehaze, it's going to create contrast between the bright parts of the image and the dark parts, and that's kind of what the effect does. It obviously does more than that. But something I could do is bring down the exposure, bring up the dehaze, and that's going to create this effect, which is really interesting because if I go in here and turn this off and I go to my main edit and just bring the exposure down, there's barely any data here to work with. Like the luminance value between this part of the cloud and the bottom part of the sky here is so subtle that it's even hard to separate the two. But because we're in black and white, we can really push some of the sliders more than normal to kind of bring out those details. And I'm assuming the way that I would transition from the ground to the sky here is I would probably just range mask this to give me less of the ground. Something like this. Obviously, I would need to play around with this transition. Your transition between the two is perfect. And I think if I sat here and played with it a little bit longer, I could get it. So if you're just joining, welcome. No, I think for extra clarity and texture, it works for this particular image. So if I were to like I said, if I were to keep doing this and kept playing with the transition here, and then working my range mask to be, well, let's just see if we can get it perfect. I don't even know if I'll be able to do it in Lightroom. Did you do the whole edit in Lightroom, or did you take it into Photoshop? Hey, Torch. Welcome. Brady, you can submit down below, but it's going to be hard for me to include people submitting photos right this second. Most people sent them before the stream started, but if I do have time and you're still here, I can take a look at some photos if we run out of photos to look at. Yeah. Definitely think luminance filter is the way to go here, but I will admit I'm having a tough time getting it perfect. I think if I played around with it more and something along these lines, obviously that's not perfect. There's too much of a glow. I think the way you edit it is great though. And that's why I said I don't even really want to sit here and edit it, because I don't think I'm going to do a better job for that particular image. Juan, if I have time, I will remind me if you're still here. Okay, so let's take a look at the drone image. So I don't know what exact drone you were shooting on, but I know that when I shoot images on my drone, I'm not in love with the color science. My images always just look too blue or too orange, one of the two, and it just never looks great for me. Okay, Air 2. It's probably close to the Mavic Pro 2, which is what I shoot on. So your crop is good because I think that this particular photo, I don't know where to look. I don't know what the subject is. This is definitely here's a scene, and you're just supposed to look at the whole scene kind of thing. So when I look at your crop, it gives me a slightly better idea of what you want me to see, which is this, I guess it's a mound in the foreground. I don't know. It's not a butte. Well, we'll just call it a hill. But still, my eye doesn't really go anywhere. And I think that's a particular problem with this shot, is just that the subject matter just isn't there. But in terms of editing, taking a look at your edit, like I said, I think it's too blue. And straight out of camera, the Mavic is already going to look a specific way. So we're going to have less room to play around with it than, say, when you take a photo with your camera. I'm not going to crop this because I'm just going to leave it how it is. If you want to, I think your crop is fine. But in terms of the edit, let's just take a look really quick. I don't think that you really need to do a whole lot to this image. I think for what it is, I think it's pretty good. Like I said, I warmed it up a little bit. I'm going to bring the saturation down some because when I added that contrast in, it's going to make that saturation a little bit more. And I think that a lot of the shots that I take on my Mavic are oversaturated. So even shooting D-Log. Again, there's not a whole lot to do with the image. Something that you could do, if we really wanted to get creative, is crop down to how you kind of had it cropped. We could darken the whole image like this. And then we could kind of create a source of light over here on the right, because there's one already appearing off here. We could do some kind of more creative stuff like this. Bring down the dehaze to give a little bit more of a glow. Maybe this is a little too bright. I'm going to warm up that light a little bit. Something like this. Probably needs to be less feathered. I'm going to bring up the shadows to target some of this like that. Sorry, to target some of these shadows. I didn't even finish my sentence. And again, as you can tell, when you bring the exposure down, it really pushes up those blues. So I'm going to go back into my HSL and bring down the blues a little bit more. And I think something like this looks pretty cool. And really all it took was to just drop the exposure on the image, add a big radio filter, and we basically turned what is a pretty flatly exposed image. And again, I don't mean flat in the sense that there's no contrast, because obviously if you look at the histogram, there's shadows and there's highlights and there's bright parts of the cloud. But we kind of created or painted in this glaring, glowing light that's already hitting the side of the mountain here. And I think overall that looks pretty cool. And this was your edit. And this is the edit we just did. And I think this is adding a really cool contrasty scene. You could even try to play around with black and white with this image if you wanted to. But I actually kind of like the colors in here. And I think that's a pretty cool look for this particular image. What do you think, Gregory? Do you think that kind of livened up the shot? Again, not to sound mean, just a critique, I think that the particular composition is lacking a subject. But by the way we edited it and added this kind of light here, your eye has a better idea of what the subject is. And you could even take it a step further. You could come in here and either range mask the luminance so that's not as bright over here, or you could come in here with the brush, come to erase, have a huge feather, less of a flow, I'll turn off auto mask, and then just kind of paint out some of the spots that are right here already in the clouds that are in the mask. So if I hover over now, it'll be painted out a little bit. And there's still a bit of a glow here, but it's not as bright over here. But now it's bright on our scene. But I think just doing that little trick by adding that little beam of light, and that's up to you, the style of editing, the kind of editing you enjoy. And it's going to give you a different way to look at the image, considering this is where we started. But I think overall, though, that definitely brightens up the image. And you could even crop in a little bit more if you wanted to get a better idea of exactly what you're looking at. Something like this. But yeah, I think it looks pretty good. Obviously, I would go in and add a little bit of sharpening before I exported and stuff like that. But I think overall it looks pretty good. Well, I don't know what it looked like when you were there. But what I would say is if this was your subject, if the intention of your image was that this mound in the foreground was your subject, I would probably aim the gimbal a little bit farther down, putting this a little bit higher in your frame. And even if whatever's below it you don't want in the image, you can crop it out later, because I think that there's the biggest problem with the image is that your horizon line is directly in the middle, and even if we're assuming this is your subject, it's a little bit too far down on the frame, and it needs to be brought up a little bit into the frame. Because the other thing is the clouds look great, but we don't really care all that much about how much of the clouds are in the image. So I feel like a lot of your frame is being taken up by the clouds, but I don't think your composition changes all that much if I cropped like this or if I cropped like this, right? So obviously if you want those textures in the clouds for people to be able to see, that matters. But I really don't think that that's where, as long as we know they're clouds and they look like clouds and they're adding that, sky into the image, I don't think it matters as much how much of that is in the frame. Brady, I mean, literally all it takes is just time. Thank you. Thank you for the sub and notification, man. That's awesome. Thank you. And don't ever think you can't be as good as me, I promise. All right. I hope that answers your question, Gregory. Stick down. What do you mean? So if the drone is hovering and you just can you move the gimbal? I don't know if you can move the gimbal on the air, but then you just aim the gimbal down a little bit so it's shooting farther. Basically just putting this thing in more in the center of your frame. Okay. I hope that answers your question. Thank you for submitting, and again, thank you for the donation. This stuff takes a lot of time and effort to get all this stuff organized, so it means the world that you guys are supporting me sending that stuff in. Oh, thank you, Christopher. Okay, Christopher, I will do yours after the next one. Let me don't let me forget. 58. I'm going to scroll back up here. I know there's people waiting. Again, I'm sorry. I will try to get to your as soon as I can. A lot of people, we had over 35 submissions, I think. So quite a few images or people to look through. Okay. If I'm going in order here, Justin was next. Justin, are you still here? Stevenson? Also, if you happen to donate or something and you tell me a number and you can't watch when I actually do it, this will be posted to my channel, so you can always check it out in the future. Okay, Justin, we'll take a look. I think you said, I already forgot the number. Didn't I mention I have semi-photographic memory, but I apparently cannot remember a number you just told me? 8 to 11. Okay. I think I can just go up here. Okay. Let's see. I have your name here. Okay. So I think you sent me 2 images and 2 edits. Guys, I will try to get to everyone's if you're still here. I'll try my best. All right. So here is the unedited version. Here's the edited version. I think your edits look pretty good. I like the crop. I think that most of the blue sky is pretty irrelevant. and it's a little busy in the foreground. And this gives you a better idea of what you're trying to look at, which is the scene of a lake. I will say it's interesting because the road is on the very right part of the frame. And I can't quite tell yet if it's distracting or if it just adds more to the scene. I know that's confusing, but sometimes when elements are so far to the right or the left or the top or the bottom of a frame, sometimes you're purposely putting them there so that your viewer doesn't see them, but they add to the overall part of the scene, which is obviously this road on this hillside. Yeah, I think overall your main image here is lacking subject. And this is kind of what's interesting about people sending me their edits plus their non-edited version, is because if you had just sent me this, I probably would have said, I don't know what I'm supposed to look at here. I don't know what you're trying to tell me as a photographer. Is the subject matter this road? And this looks more like a snapshot to me, as in you were driving along, you saw some cool light on the mountains over here, you got out of your car and you snapped a photo. That's what it looks like to me, and there's nothing wrong with that. I still shoot that way sometimes. Some of my really favorite photos are that way. But I don't know what I'm supposed to look at. But then when I look at your edit, I have a much better idea of what you're trying to show me, which is this light that's on the mountains, light that's in the water here, and then just a touch of being able to see this road that kind of gives you a sense of scale, a sense of where you are. And that's why I think that trying to follow composition rules is difficult, because I know that I've been saying, okay, try to keep your elements more in the center of the frame, don't have them directly on the right or left. But in this particular image, in this particular crop, having it so far on the right just kind of adds a little bit of scenery rather than more of a distraction. I think if I were to edit this in the exact same way, I think I would leave this just a tiny bit darker, because in my opinion, it's if it was just a tiny bit darker, it would be slightly less distracting and more of just an element in the photo. That's just my opinion. Again, I think that you already know, like I said, what the issues with the original photo are. It definitely lacks a subject. It lacks what am I supposed to be looking at, and it looks more like a snapshot. But I like how you took the edit. I like how you basically, like you said, salvage the photo with the edit. And I do that quite a few times. There's definitely times where I take really poor photos that come to life in the edit. And I think obviously you edited this in a way that I might not. So it definitely has, in my eyes, it has more of a orange or red teal tint to the color of the light. Perfectly fine. Definitely looks like you brought up the blacks so that the blacks are brought up and it's giving more of a vintage look. I think that's pretty cool. Let me catch up here. Yeah, a lot of people, even me, when I started out, I think one thing we all go through as shooting landscape photos is that the majority of the time when we're shooting landscape photos, especially starting out, even for years, a lot of the times we're just shooting photos when we're on trips with family, significant others. We're doing something else, and we're going to take those photos just because we're in beautiful places. And I will say, and it's something I'll probably talk about more in the future, is if people can go out and deliberately take a trip or take just a day trip where they're going specifically just to shoot landscape photos. It can be really, really rewarding because you're going to take photos rather than going to a beautiful place and taking photos of it. And I think there's a huge difference there in terms of what your intentions are with the photo. But I mean, I have plenty of photos of I'm just on a trip with my family. When I started shooting landscape photography specifically, I was on trips with family that I would try to just do whatever I could to go take landscape photos. If the picture is marked green, I know that it's for critique, even though I probably missed a few. If you want to send me a photo, you can. The details are down below, but I will say that quite a few people have submitted, and it will take me time. If I have time, I'll try to go through the ones that are in my email right now waiting, if you're still here. Well, if you're in New York City, how far is it 𝐒𝐤𝐚𝐥𝐬? Yeah, 𝐒𝐤𝐚𝐥𝐬. How far is that from New York City? Thanks, Kyle. I'm going to try to go in his order as much as possible. And again, if you feel like you don't have much time, you can submit a donation and say the number, and I'll try to get to you sooner. You can also, I'm going to try to get to everybody if I can, if you're still here. But if you've said your number and you have to leave, this will be posted to my channel. All right, so let me really quickly take a look at your other image. Okay, so this is a much better example of an image that you shot with intention of a subject. So even though this foreground element, it's not like, a very prominent subject, I at least know when I see this that because of the way the focus is the haze in the sky, that this is what your subject was to lead your eye to the back of the scene. Your edit is, in my opinion, for my editing style, is too red. I would probably not have as much red tonality in it. However, that could have been what you were going for. So there are a set of images that I've edited really weirdly because that's what I wanted. Overall, I think that this image is probably just too hazy to really do a whole lot with. I mean, even if we crank the dehaze slider, which is something you probably did, there's just so much clarity missing in the background here that it's going to be hard to work with. What you could do, and I know that you have the top part of this mountain range here, or range here, that really adds an element to there, but it's so hazy that it's somewhat distracting. And something you could do is something like this, to where you kind of get rid of that. It's a little bit less distracting. And again, I think it's just going to be too hazy to really get anything out of this. I'd probably do something like this. Add a radial filter to here. I'm going to darken the rest of the image rather than this. And then I'm going to create another exactly same radial filter, but I'm going to invert it. And I'm going to brighten that part just ever so slightly. Let's bring this down. Let's range mask it to give it just a tiny bit more control, so it's maybe not hitting those highlights in the back. This is probably still too strong, but something along those lines, I think. I think something like this looks a lot better. Please note that that radial filter I just did is creating too much of a halo right around here. I would not leave it like that, but I think I would edit it a little bit more like this. I feel like the haze here is just a bit too strong. Yeah, made up. When I used to go with my family, or when I visited family, like we would go to Zion and stuff, I would try to take at least one morning sunrise shoot where I would just go by myself, shoot the sunrise, come back, and then do whatever we were going to do that day. But it is very difficult, and you can do way better if you go on a trip for just yourself. So I did not know 𝐒𝐤𝐚𝐥𝐬 was that far away from New York City, Justin. I thought it would be much closer. Brady, the email should be down below, yeah. Okay. I hope that answers your question, Justin. I don't know why I keep saying that. I hope that critique or my ideas behind the edit give you ideas for how you might go back and edit the image. Again, I don't think this is great or anything, but just an idea of how to work with that bright haze in the background. Well, a different idea, I think. So let's go back. Yeah, of course. Okay. Let me, okay, Chris, 58. That's what we're looking at now. Let's see. Oh, okay. I think I remember you sending me this and saying that you accidentally shot the tripod and that you're a food photographer that's also a chef, I believe. All right, so let's see what we're working with. How much data can I recover in these highlights? Okay. So I think we're going to talk about composition first, and I don't know how much I'll actually edit the image, just because I think that one of the things about the image that's lacking is, again, subject matter. So this image gives me the feel and the style of those images. Let me see if I can bring one up. 1 second. I'll use one of my images as an example. So I get the vibes of an image like this when I see this kind of image, right? But the difference is something I would have done is I would have picked out what I wanted my foreground subject to be, because right now it's just too busy. I think that overall you have a lot of elements of stuff in the foreground, so you have all these rocks, but I think two things you could have done that would have really made this a lot better is, let's say you got much lower, and I know that you're probably balancing on icy rocks, and it is not easy. Trust me, I completely understand. But if you had tried to pick out one rock, so we'll go back to my example. I had this one rock in the foreground that I wanted so that it was easy for somebody to be able to tell, okay, this is the first thing I'm going to look at, or I'm going to look at the mountain and it's going to lead my eye through it. Whereas when the image you took, I can tell you're a little higher up, and that if you had gotten just a little bit closer to one specific rock and then had your eye led through these other icy rocks up to where the sunburst is. I think that would have... Hey, Clarence. Welcome. If you guys are new here, welcome to the channel. Just live streaming some critique. And user submitted photos. Feel free to chat, join in, etc. So, as I was saying, Chris, I think that would have made this photo a lot more, specifically the composition, a lot better. The other thing that's distracting about the image is this tree over here doesn't really add anything to the image. And I say that because not only is it far off on the left part of the frame, it's kind of fighting with the sun here, right? So it's not really, my eye isn't led there. It's not really the subject. And again, this comes back to a lot, I keep saying this about a lot of people's photos, is what am I supposed to look at? Now, again, you sent me the unedited version. So maybe in editing, you could have told me that by, let's say I cropped this out to something like this, or let's say I did this, and now maybe I have a better idea. So these icy rocks are the subject. But again, even this crop is bad because one of the brightest parts is right here in the bottom right of the photo. Hey, thanks, Kailash. If I have time, I will try to get to them, but there are a ton of photos to go through. Christopher, I hope this is making sense, and I know for a fact, because I checked out your 500 pics, that you know what you're doing. So I hope that what I'm saying makes sense in terms of trying to shoot this particular photo. The other hard part about this photo, and you may have done it, is because you're shooting into the sun. I don't know why I didn't just hit reset, but because you're shooting into the sun, I also would have bracketed the photo. Now you're shooting on a Z6. I said Z like I'm European, but fun times. You're shooting on a Z6, so there's actually a lot to recover here, but I probably would have bracketed my photo just so that I could get even more detail out of the sky. And then I could have blended them together. But I really didn't want to focus on that when I saw the image, just because I think that overall the image is just lacking in terms of composition. So just the basic fundamentals of, I don't care about the dynamic range. I don't care about the lighting conditions. Realistically, I wanted more subject matter to know what to look at. Now, something you could do for this image, because it doesn't necessarily, and again, I don't know what your intentions were, but if your intentions were a photo like this one, for example, where you have a foreground element that leads you through the middle of the photo to a background element. That's kind of the vibes I get from this photo, is that you have something in the foreground, you have a leading line to the background, and then the sun is the background. And was that the intention with the photo? If you can answer that. Hey, Scram, welcome back. Another photo I have that's similar to this follows the same criteria, and again, it's a style of shooting. It's not necessary. Do I have it somewhere? Oh, I don't have it in one of these photos. Oh, here it is. This image is kind of the same way, right? Where, again, I have a very clear foreground right here, and then the middle, kind of the middle of the image doesn't necessarily have a subject particularly, but your eye is led to the sun or the sky or the clouds, something like that. Okay, I'm glad that I at least caught what you were trying to do, but I think overall what's mostly lacking is just that what you couldn't do is get lower to the rock and then find a specific rock. And a video that I have that might really help is actually from Blue Lakes hike. I know you live in Colorado, I believe. The Blue Lakes hike, so you may have done it before. There's a video on my channel. It's titled Scouting Locations is Really Important, or something along those lines. The Importance of Scouting Locations, something along those lines. But in that particular video, I take exactly this kind of image where I just find a rock in the foreground, focus on that rock. I take 3 focus stacks, and then I have just lines leading up to it. The picture isn't perfect, but at least explain my thought process behind actually being there to shoot the photo, which I think would really help for this particular photo, if that makes sense. So I hope that answers your question. I don't necessarily want to edit the photo, because I think if I were to edit this, like let's assume that this was a perfect composition, you had exactly, one rock in the foreground and everything was lined up correctly. A lot of the editing would be actually pretty heavy-handed, because I would want to, basically, I'll give you an example of what I would want to do. I would want to darken the whole image, and then I would want to paint in light to all of the spots that need the light. So a great example is this photo, where the whole image I darkened up, and then I would paint in light on the rocks here, where it was glowing from the sun, the reflections in the water, and then I would obviously make sure that this was bright enough. And I hope that answers your question. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's, let me give you the exact name of the video. I'll just show it to you really quick. The intro to this video is actually one of my favorites. It's it's cinematic. It's just fun to shoot, fun to edit. It is this video. Let's see if I can get it over here. The Importance of Location Scouting and Landscape Photography. But the spot that I picked here, I'll just show you the final image. This is the image. And you can get an idea of some of the rocks, middle ground, foreground. Talks about a focus stack. But I talk about the composition in this particular image. And I think the biggest thing that will be challenging is you just might have to focus stack. And all that means is that you'll just select 3 different focus points, bring them into Photoshop, put them together. But I think that's what you were going with for this image. And again, I think it's just lacking that foreground element. It's just too busy. So yeah, thank you for submitting. And again, thank you for the donation. And I hope what I said is not offensive. I will say it's very awkward for me to tell people what they did wrong in an image. But a lot of the times it's more about talking about what you did right and then just saying how you can improve it. Because I think that there's a lot here that is correct. Obviously aside from the tripod being in the shot. But I think if you just got lower to the scene, picked out a specific rock, and then just shot the exact same shot, you would have come away with something a little bit better. So, okay. I'm going to go back to my library here. And I'm going to scroll up and see who was next. And again, I'll try to get to as many as I can. Stuart Powers, are you still here? Hey, Stuart. Mona, I'm just trying to go through these in order of people that said them, and if they're still here, just trying to get to their images. Again, if you really want me to look at your image and you really want me to critique it, feel free to donate, but do not feel pressured. I'm going to try to get to everyone's image, but there's a line, I guess. I wish I could just do everybody's all at once, but okay, Stuart, let's take a look at yours. I think you were next. Let's see. Okay. Wait, I just had your number here a second ago. 61. Okay. All right. 61. Oh, yes. You sent me your edit and non-edited. So obviously, I think, well, maybe it's not obvious to everybody, but your editing is very light, and that's totally cool. So this is a great example of when the subject matter of a photo doesn't matter. And I know that that goes against kind of what I've said about a lot of the last photos, is that in the last photos, there's a lot of elements going on, but I don't know where my eye is supposed to look. However, in this particular photo, there isn't necessarily a specific subject, and this is what I like to call like a layer photo. And a great example of this, and I'm just going to use my photo as an example. Let's see if is one that I actually think I'm going to post today, is the image that I worked on last week. This image, there is no subject in the image. It's more of an abstract style image. There's not one particular thing I'm looking at. And the whole purpose of the image is supposed to be the colors, the tones, the layers that are in the sky. That is the purpose of the image. Whereas when I look at this image, I also get those vibes. I got these very minimalistic, just lines of snow, a little bit of a frozen lake, the cloud inversion that's happening here, the mountains, and everything is just layered purposely and perfectly to give me those vibes that it's supposed to be, you know, that there's not necessarily a specific subject, but it's just a layered photo with a lot of atmosphere. And I hope that makes sense. So the whole point that I'm trying to make is that not every photo has to have a subject. But if you're taking a photo that you want there to be a subject, you need to make sure that person knows what it is. But if you're taking a photo where you're just taking a photo for the layers and the atmosphere and the feels, kind of like this, then in my opinion, the purpose of the photo is for those tones, for the colors, for the textures. But you have to be deliberate, right? So if, for example, and I'm going to use your edited photo really quick, if my subject was this mountain, I would be deliberate about making sure that you're looking at this mountain. But that was not what you try to do with this photo. It's more of a layered, minimalist style photo. Yeah, Gregory. Honestly, if I could do these every day, it would be cool. But I feel like that would probably be oversaturated. Hey, Jerby. Thank you. I also like the concept. I feel like it's underrepresented. Yeah, Stuart. I mean, again, I'm using your photo as an example. I know I really haven't critiqued it specifically, but I talk a lot and I tell people, like, for example, when we looked at this photo earlier, I asked, what's the subject? Or when we look at, I'll go through a few more photos that I critiqued already, and I say, you know, what is the subject I'm looking at? We just looked at this one. What is the subject? And for these particular photos, the intention is the calm, quiet textures, the layers that are going off or through the image, the sky, the mountains, the clouds, the foreground. Stuart, I wouldn't necessarily crop it that way. I was just using that as an example to say, okay, if you want me to look at this mountain, that's how I would crop this image, right? But in my opinion, I like your edit. We can take a look at the image you sent me and just see really quick. So something that's really interesting about images like this is that I want them to be a little bit more flat. I don't want a ton of contrast in here. And you already did that with your edit. It's very flat. And that's on purpose. That's on purpose because if we added too much contrast, I'm going to really pump the contrast, bring the blacks all the way down, the whites all the way up, and I'm going to turn it to black and white. We get a completely different, and the only reason I turned it to black and white there is so I don't, if I wanted to balance this out, I could, but I really just wanted to show that if you purposely try to punch up the contrast, this feeling of this photo is completely different than the feeling of this photo. And I feel like turning it to black and white removes all of those really nice tones in the sky, that blue hour look. And I've been really enjoying the blue hour look recently, where you've got pinks in the sky, blues in your shadows, stuff like that. And I think that you have to really think about, what is all this? What is going on up here, Stuart? You might want to clean your sensor. Sorry. I don't know why I thought that was so funny. Okay, get it together, Alex. Okay, so I hope it makes sense that every photo we approach is going to have a different style, different intention, and that's kind of what people do with their photography, their expression of, do I want to shoot a very quiet minimalist shot like this? Do I want to shoot a more high contrast painted light shot like this? And it's all going to depend on what you're shooting. It's all going to depend on the moment that you're taking the photos. And the best thing you can do is just be ready. Okay, these are the conditions I'm being presented. How am I going to take this photo with these conditions? And that's kind of why, if you look at my Instagram and you look at my stuff particularly, I don't take the same style image all the time. So there's a lot of landscape photographers out there. Nick Page definitely branches out sometimes. Joshua Snow, Ryan DR, Ted Gore, those kind of people. They all take images that are very similar in the sense, not that they're similar to each other, but their style is very apparent. All of their images look a specific way. They have a foreground element and it's super contrasty, or it's super saturated, or it's really dark and there's like touches of light everywhere, and that is their style. Whereas I am the type of person that tries to shoot a little bit of everything depending on the conditions I'm presented. So if I were to walk up to something like this, I would imagine this is kind of the style I would take, rather than trying to find an image that's more like, well, this one, right? So I try to branch out. I try to be fluid in that way, where I take photos of all kinds of different styles. That's really what I enjoy. I like branching out. I like having options. And sometimes I really get into a specific genre that I like this kind of genre. So I hope that makes sense. And I hope that was somewhat insightful to know that every scenery you're going to have different conditions, and you'll have to find the styles that you enjoy shooting. And honestly, the absolute best way you can do it is just find photographers you like, say, okay, this is what they're doing, and try to replicate it. That's really it. And then you're going to learn how to shoot those photos so that those conditions are presented. You know how to take them when they're there. Yeah, Gregory. Speaking of, I will always offer one-on-one sessions with people. And I'm trying to balance that because obviously my time is important as well, in the sense that when I lose my job, I will have to pay bills somehow. So I'm going to try to keep doing these live critiques and stuff, but I'm hoping that there's enough value for people that might want to take it to the next level that can contact me specifically, and we can talk about their photos one-on-one if you ever want to, or anything like that. Stuart, if you're still here, I know that I haven't talked about your photo yet, but I'll be completely honest and say I really don't think I need to edit it. I think the way you edited the photo is very close to how I would edit it. So I don't think it needs very much. I do like the way that you added back in that color. So let's see if I can figure out how you did that. I don't want it to be too blue. And I need to fix the music, because let's go back to this. There we go. I really like the way you had, well, that's too much. Just a touch of red. Little touch. Maybe I would bring down, so something that you could do if you wanted to, so you could just create a big radial filter here in the middle, and we're talking huge. Let's make it even bigger. Really big. And then just darken just ever so slightly, the foreground and the background, to kind of give you a semi-vignette. But I mean, I'm pretty sure this is looking almost exactly like the edit that you did with slight less contrast. Maybe if I added a little bit of dehaze. But yeah, I think your edit is great. In terms of what you were going for, I really like the style. I guess is this a cloud right here? What is that? It's just like there's this little break of no color right there. Stuart, if you're still here. Oh, is my cam good? Oh, let me check. Did it fix itself? Okay, good. All right. Okay, it's a tiny cloud. So I think if I was being like really, like, let's say you wanted to put this in your portfolio, I would probably take this into Photoshop, and see if I could content aware or not spot healing brush, stamp brush this little cloud out so that the tones are full, like the same the whole way through. That's what I would try to do if you can do it and make it look good. But that's what I would do. That's like literally the only other thing I would probably do for this style of image. The cool thing about an image like this is it looks good like this, but let's say we wanted to post it to Instagram. We go over here by 4x5 and I press X on my keyboard to switch the orientation, which, by the way, I think someone in my chat said it last week or the week before, is that I could do something like this. And then now I have a, layered photo for Instagram that looks really cool as well. Cause it's not like all of the layers are still there. We just cropped it this way to get rid of it, to take it from landscape to portrait. And now I have a photo that I could post to Instagram. It's pretty cool. I love photos like that. Okay. Stuart, thank you for submitting your photo and letting me talk about it. Let's go on to the next one. And after this photo, I'm going to take a few minute break to just move around for a second. But I'll only be gone for a couple minutes. So let's take a look at one more photo and then I will take a small break. Let's see. God, I've barely gotten through any on this list. Matea, 22 and 55. Matea, I hope I said your name right. Okay. Let's see. I can just select your name up here. All right. Okay. So you sent me, I think, 2 photos and 2 edits. These are cool. Where is this? Is this Norway? New Zealand? Matteo, are you still here? Oh, cool. Oh, this is Italy. Italy? Okay. All right. So we'll start with this one. So the one thing that I notice here is I think that for my taste, it's a little oversaturated. I do love the tonality, contrast of the peaks of the mountains to the shadow that you can clearly see being cast through the valley here. But I think the shadows are just a touch too blue and probably needs to being brought down a little bit. That's what I would do. The other thing is compositionally, I don't think that this foreground is doing anything for me. And I'm not sure how, like, what the ledge was like right here. But really, I wish, and again, I'm going to sound harsh here, so don't take it too harshly. I really wish this was the image that I was seeing, right? I don't really care about any of these rocks in the foreground. And I think that the colors in the sky and the cloud and the way it's got this haze in the background is really interesting. And again, even if I cropped it like this, or let's say you went back and took this exact photo, you know, where you stood up more and only got the lake and the mountains, I think that, again, this would be another photo to talk about subject matter. And to me, it would be obvious that this is a scene photo rather than a photo where I'm trying to look for a subject. And I do think that this little mountaintop here being lit up like this is enough for me to say, okay, the subject of the photo is basically the light that's happening in the image. And I think that's pretty cool. I do think, again, that this foreground is distracting. It doesn't do a whole lot for the image. Let's take a look at how I would edit this image. Well, let me look at your other one first. That is not the button I wanted to hit. I like your edit in this one, although I think I would crop out the right side a bit more. But we'll have to take a look really quick. Let's take a look at this edit. Torch, you can if you want to. You don't have to. Okay, so I'm going to crop this in to give you an idea of where I would crop. But you don't have to. This isn't going to be perfect. So I think I'm actually going to crop out that part. Try to square it up as much as possible. And try to balance this hill over here as much as possible. And just kind of remove this as best I can. We can darken that up as well. And now what I'm trying to do is, in terms of balance, I'm trying to use this peak here as a subject and balance it with the lake down here. And the reason that I'm telling you that and that's important is because if I wanted to crop more, I don't want to crop out the lake if I'm trying to balance those two things. So we'll start with this. Nope, I like the crop before. We'll start with this. And we'll go from here. So I'm going to add some contrast in. I'm going to turn landscape profile on. It's going to kind of do what the blue saturation slider does down here. So I'm also going to do that, but then I will definitely correct my exposures, my saturations in the HSL slider. So that's probably too much. I think something like this is probably close. I will have to massage this a little bit more as I keep editing it. So anytime you add dehaze, it is going to shoot up the saturation of your colors by quite a bit. So I don't want to add too much. And then I will deal with, I want to definitely highlight this area a little bit more. So I'm just going to make a big radial filter. And we're just going to ever so slightly bring up the whites probably here. Actually, I'm going to make it huge, kind of giving that whole section of water a little bit. Big feather. Bring up the exposure just a tad more. We're just adding a little touch of light there. If I delete that and put it back in, I think that's looking a little bit better. And it doesn't look so unnatural that there's like some haloing effect or anything like that. It's just adding a little bit more light down there. Something else I think is probably, I'm going to just increase the exposure of the whole bottom half of the image, because the sky is quite bright. So I'm going to increase the exposure, but then I'm also going to increase the contrast, which is going to kind of fight the exposure, because I still want it to appear dark, but I also want to be able to see it. The other thing you can do is bring up the whites. Let's bring this down. This is probably a little too much, but just a touch. And then I'm going to create another G&D here. And even though this foreground is dark already, I'm just going to darken it up just a little bit more. And I think this is looking okay. Compositionally, I do think it could be stronger. Like maybe I should be balancing this cloud with the mountain, but then I'm cutting off the lake. And I'm really just fighting this foreground as best I can. Maybe something like this, but then it just feels like there's not enough weight in the bottom of the photo. Let's bring up the overall exposure a little bit. Let's bring up the whites a little bit, and then we're going to bump this to strong contrast. I'm going to bring down the saturation a little bit. The other thing you can do is go to luminance in your HSL, and you can bring up the blues, and that will add a little bit of luminance to this area as well. So I'm going to do that just a touch. I'm going to go, that's not what I meant to hit. I'm going to go back in here, adjust this one more time. We're going to use some dehaze here. It's going to make that area a little bit more blue, but that's not the worst. We're going to fight that again by coming back over here to the HSL and bringing the blue saturation down just a tad. And I think overall, that's probably close to what I would do. I think that this looks too bright. And I think that even though this appears dark, probably, maybe I would continue to brighten up the foreground just a little bit more. To maybe something like this. The problem is every time I'm increasing the exposure, you're just getting more and more of that haze in the image. So you're really trying to fight that, where I want to brighten it up some, but I'm fighting the haze that's there. But I think overall I would edit it something like this. And I hope that shows you what I would do. Again, I think the hardest part is fighting this foreground. The subject of the photo is the light in the image. Okay, yeah, that sounded terrible, Gregory. You're right. What I meant to say was how the light is hitting the peaks. Yes, this is what happens when you live. Like I literally am just stream of conscious, just blurting out what I'm thinking. If you guys are new here, welcome. Yeah, the light's really cool. Something else you could do, honestly, is just, you could just forego a lot of what's in the image and just do something cool like this. I actually think this might just be better. Gets rid of that foreground element that's really kind of meh. And also this cloud is pretty distracting. And you could literally just have something like this, and I think this probably looks way better. I don't know who testing text is. I think this crop is actually probably the strongest one we just made. Let's see. Testing text. Okay, I'm just gonna put user in timeout. Does that work? Okay. I don't know what was going on there. All right. So I might not take as much time editing this image. I think, so this is your image that you sent me. I think what I would do if I were to crop this image, I like where you were going with the crop. I just think I would have been a little tighter. To maybe something like this. Because this part of the image right here, the right side, isn't really doing a whole lot for me. So I might just crop it like this. And then obviously your foreground is this snow with the trees in the middle and then the mountain range in the background. Other than that, I think the only other thing I would be cautious of is, again, your shadows are really blue. I would just bring down your blue saturation in the HSL a bit. And that's pretty much how I would edit this photo. I don't think there's much difference. I might make the sky a little bit darker. Just tiny bit. Like, obviously the mountains getting hit by the sun is pretty bright, but I would maybe make it just a tiny bit darker. Okay. All right, I will be right back, guys. I just need to stretch my legs. I'll be back in like 3 minutes. Thank you for joining in. Please stay if you still want to see some more stuff. I know a decent amount of people leave if I take a break, but I just need to walk around for a second and drink some water. So I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Just needed to use the bathroom and get some water and stuff. Luigi, I'll look at yours right now as we come back, if you want to wait. If you're still here. Otherwise, I'm just going to go in order. All right. And see who is still here. All right. Thank you guys for joining in. Just need to get some water, and been live for 2 hours now, and it is difficult to talk the entire time. So, okay, let's get back to editing. Hi, Mike. And again, I'm trying to get to everyone's photos as fast as I can. Why is this person still here? Let's see. How do I ban somebody? Okay, maybe that did it. I don't know. All right. Luigi, I didn't hear from you, so I don't know if you're still here. So I'm just going to go in order then. Guys, again, sorry if I can't get to your photo yet. I'm just scrolling up and looking at who's been here the longest. Simon, are you still here? Simon, number 45. I feel like I'm calling numbers in, like, you know, the DMV or whatever. All right, Mona, we'll take a look at yours then. And then Trevor, or no, I'll go to Jean after that. 57. Oh my God, this person's still here. How do I ban this person? Hide user on this channel? Does that do it? I don't know how this person keeps coming back. I don't even know what their purpose is. Like, what are they? I don't understand. Okay. All right, Simon. I will take a look at yours after I take a look at Mona's, which is, I believe you said 57, right, Mona? This one? Which I believe your first name is H-O-C-H-O-K, right? Hawk, I think. Well, I'm going to be completely honest and say that I don't think this photo needs much to be done. This is definitely the same style photo as before in terms of layered lighting. Except it's far more vibrant than, let's say, this photo was when we just looked at it a bit ago. There isn't a whole lot that needs to be done to this photo. I think what I would do is just make sure that my horizon lines are all straight as best as possible. I would probably crop out just a tiny bit of the top, maybe something like that. I don't know. Is this already edited? It doesn't seem very flat to me. Because if not, I really don't think you have to. I don't even know what. I genuinely don't know what I would add to this image. I feel like it is pretty close to where you would want it to post for the purpose of the image. I think if I was to post this on Instagram, for example, I would switch it to maybe something more along the lines of something like this. But if you're just trying to take a landscape photo like this, I really don't think there's a whole lot. I think that your balance of the sun to the mountain here is pretty perfect. You could maybe crop in to make it more of a square this way. I will say that one distracting element, if I had to say there is one, is this reflection down here. Maybe you would darken that up if you didn't want that in your image. So you could just add a graduated filter here and bring down the highlights specifically, so it's just not as distracting. But I don't even have to add contrast to this image. I don't know how much else I would do it to it. Oh my God. Sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'll start over. That's embarrassing. That had to have happened at some point, though. Okay. Okay, I got it. You guys can see my screen now. Sorry. He's just sitting here watching me talk. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Sorry. I knew that was going to happen someday. But, all right. Now that I'm embarrassed. Okay. So this is the photo I was talking about. And now it probably makes more sense. Is that this is completely unedited. And everything still applies. So I'll repeat what I said. If I was going to post this to Instagram, I would just set 4x5 because that's the optimal way to post on Instagram. Maybe I would post something like this. But if you're just shooting the whole landscape, there really isn't a whole lot to do with this photo. I might crop out the top a little bit. Like I said, compositionally, the balance between this mountain and the sun is pretty good. Maybe you can square it up a bit. And the only distracting part of the image is in the foreground, maybe if you don't want it there. And it is this little reflection of, I guess, water down there. I would just bring down the highlights a little bit so it's a little less bright. But I mean, the reason I asked if this was edited already is because it's already so contrasty and colorful, and yeah, I definitely wouldn't do that. Maybe it's a tad too warm, but I feel like that's kind of the look that you're going for. Like that is what it looked like probably. I really don't think you have to do a whole lot to the image. Man, I lost a lot of viewers when I was on the wrong scene. These people are like, well, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, and we're out. Yeah, I don't think there's anything. I don't think that you really need to do a whole lot to this image. I mean, even trying to add contrast in, it's it's not needed. I mean, we could sit here and play around with, like, I could say bring up the shadows and stuff, but I don't think that's needed either. Maybe bring down the clarity a bit so it looks a little bit more whimsical. But I just don't think there's a whole lot that you need to do to the image. I wouldn't necessarily say it has to be untouched. I did crop it a little bit, and I removed some highlights on this particular part down here. I mean, the other thing you could do if you really want to get technical, if that area was distracting, is you could do that. But I feel like that removes the balance in the photo, and I think this is just better. But I don't think there's a whole lot I would do to this photo. So I know you've been waiting around for me to look at this, probably because very likely you're like, what the hell do I do with this photo? But to be completely honest, I don't think you need to do a whole lot. People in the chat can chime in and say what they think, but I think overall, completely unedited, it looks pretty good. Yeah, I don't think there's only so much you can do with an image, right? So like, I don't think there's a lot. Maybe it's a tad oversaturated, maybe, but that really just depends on what you want to do with it. But all the tonality is really good. I wouldn't do anything else if I were to post this. Okay. Hope that answers the question. Next, I believe, is Simon. Simon, let's see. Let's make sure I'm still on the editing screen here. Okay, still on the editing screen. Good. All right. Simon was 45. Oh, you sent this to me today, and I actually couldn't open it in Lightroom because I guess it's a Z6 II? I don't know. I couldn't open it for some reason. I had to update Lightroom. Made up, yeah. I showed a vertical crop if I was going to post it to Instagram, with the sun kind of in the middle. Yeah, if you guys have to leave and it's really late where you are, just put your number in chat and I'll try to get to it now. I'll go out of order a little bit just to try to get people that are still here and waiting. So I think this is a pretty cool shot. Obviously, double rainbow. You got some seagulls in here. You got some light on whatever heck this is, a research center or something. Luigi, I think maybe you went AFK because I said I would look at your photos if you're still here, but then you never answered. So I'll do yours next after this. I don't think this photo is going to need a whole lot. Simon, I think crop-wise, I might tiny bit crop it here. Obviously, you want that double rainbow in. Turn on Adobe Landscape here and add some contrast in. Maybe crop it off here a little bit. I'm trying to balance because obviously the subject is this house with the rainbow. So you're going to have to make a tough decision here. So I think this crop works if you're trying to keep in the seagull in the second part of the rainbow. But I think a stronger crop will very likely be something like this, where the balance between the house and the rainbow is more obvious. But that's honestly is going to be completely up to you in terms of what you want to leave in your photo. I also don't like necessarily cropping off this rock, but the balance doesn't feel right unless I crop into it a little bit. That'll be something you have to decide on. But in terms of like the actual edit, you don't have to do a whole lot when you have a rainbow in the photo, just because it's already carrying a lot of weight in terms of how good the image looks. That's not the slider I wanted to be messing with. Dehaze does a lot to make a rainbow look vibrant, by the way. I've only ever captured the rainbow a few times, and I specifically remember that. You could go 16:9. Again, crops on a lot of images, so if you went down like this, very cool. But it really depends on what your, like, is it for print? Are you posting it to Instagram? Are you trying to make a desktop wallpaper? If I was looking at this objectively in terms of what do I want in the photo, rather than thinking about where it's going to go, personally, I think maybe cropping out the top part a little bit would be fine. I like this. It gives me a full sense of this negative space with the rainbow. But I also think the 16:9 crop, again, if you were trying to make a desktop background, doesn't look bad either. Something like this is pretty cool. The balance is probably a little bit stronger than it was before. I will say that maybe the seagull is a little bit too close to the edge. Well, for print, a lot of prints are not 16:9. I go 2:3 to get as close as you can. I would do 2:3 if you were trying to print. And probably something, like maybe you get a touch of this rainbow, or you just go the whole thing and do this. I might actually take this seagull out. Only because if that's my crop rather than this, it's kind of distracting. That's up to you though. But I think in terms of the edit, the dehaze slider does a lot for this image. Like, obviously I'm not going to boost it this much. But look how much the dehaze slider does between that and the original. I think it really brings out the vibrance in the rainbow. I think I'd actually probably push this pretty high to something like this, and then try to fight the blue saturation a little bit with my HSL. But I think something like this is pretty good. Maybe it's a little bit too red, but I think, judging by the way the light is hitting this mist, that is probably close to what the colors look like there. Well, it's not necessarily, I don't mind that it's blurred. That part doesn't matter as much to me. I just don't like that it's so far on the right part of the frame of how we cropped it. So I would probably just come in, now obviously I don't know how Lightroom's going to do, and just remove it, even though it is a cool element in the photo. But because of the way we cropped, I would take it out. Now, if you end up cropping wider or larger like this and leaving it exactly how you took the photo, which I think is also fine, you could leave it in. But with the crop that we had, I would take it out. And again, for print, 16:9 is not a standard print size. So I would try to avoid that for print. Overall, I think that the image is pretty strong. I think that you have a lot of cool elements. I will say that the foreground is a bit dark, but that's fine. It's kind of contrasting with the brightness of the rainbow. I might bring my saturation down a little bit since we popped up that dehaze so much. And in my particular images recently, I've just been bringing down the clarity by about -10, just to soften it up some. You'll also notice that we have a little bit of room to bring up the whites if we wanted to, but that's only if you really wanted to brighten up the image. Realistically, all I care about the most is making sure the brightness of that rainbow is, not only is it the brightest thing in the image, but it's not too bright where it's like pushing out the colors in the image. you could go strong contrast and just fight the foreground just a tiny bit by bringing up the shadows ever so slightly if you wanted to. I actually think just bringing them up just a little bit would be good. And then, and again, I'm giving you options because a lot of this stuff is more up to you because it's your image. You could also just add a radio filter here, unselect invert, and then darken the rest of the image a tiny bit, like this, to just give you more of a subject matter. And then doing so, I would probably bring the dehaze down a little bit, bring the saturation down a little bit. But I think that's pretty much it for that. What do you think? It's a great photo. Yeah, if you're going to print it, you're going to want to bump the exposure by about half and bring up the shadows a little bit before you print. Because on a screen, it's just going to look a lot brighter than it actually is. Standard print sizes. Typically, if you go into Lightroom and you open up the crop tool, the standard print sizes are some version of these. Now, obviously, there's way more than that, but 5x7, 2x3, 4x5, and 1x1 will give you a lot of decent print sizes. Okay. All right, Luigi. Are you still here? I am sorry. And then John, I'll do yours. And I'll try to go as fast as I can. 55 and 56. Yeah, half a stop, Simon. It really depends on the printer, but in my testing, about half a stop has been good. Okay. 55 and 56. Okay, cool. All right. So do you want me to edit your photo, or do you want me to just talk about your edit, Luigi? I swear to God, if you tell me I can do anything I want, give me some direction. And if you guys are still here and still watching, thank you again. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for being here. And if you've donated, thank you even more. But mostly I just really enjoy people chatting, hanging out. I knew you were going to say that. Okay. I'm probably, because I need to get through some more photos, going to talk about your edit and give you some tips of what you could do. Looking at your edit really quick, one thing I notice is the tonalities here I think are a little bit too pushed. So in your flat image, I can obviously tell you've brought up the shadows down here to bring out the details and the trees, but I think it's a little too much, and it makes this area look a little too harsh. What I mean by that, it's a little too grungy. It might be hard to see on YouTube, but it's just a tiny bit too pushed for me. You can kind of see it like a halo effect happening as well. So if I look here, there's the water is not that much brighter around here, but it's definitely brighter around where you were bringing up those shadows. Something else I notice is that there's a lot of tonal, like there's a little grunginess between the bright parts of this line of sky and right here, and I would try to fix that. And lastly, I think your crop could be better, more centralized. I think this crop is fine. Obviously, I think the scene is the sun and the mountains in the foreground, but I think you could probably get rid of some of the clouds if you really wanted to, and really give a better sense of what we're looking at. Something like this. You could even bring it in. And again, this is going to depend on, this is the type of image where it depends on, are you posting it to Instagram? Are you posting it for print? You have more options than just a strict, you need to remove this element. Like for example, this crop right here, I think looks much better than the crop before, for me personally. Sorry, Torch. I'm going as fast as I can. And again, I apologize guys if I couldn't get to your photo. Juan, I cannot answer that question because I don't have any clients for landscape photography. This is what I do. I make YouTube videos and talk to people on live streams. That's what I'm trying to do. I think it's very difficult to profitize or try to make a revenue stream off of strictly just landscape photography. Okay, so really quick, let's crop down to what I just had roughly. And let's do a quick edit here. So I'm going to turn on Adobe Landscape Color. I'm going to see what happens when I bring up my shadows, and I'm going to see how much I have to play with to at least get detail out of that foreground. And I can see why it was so difficult for you to get stuff out of it. So this would have been a great photo to take in HDR / multi-exposure, because you would have had more of the detail here without it looking so grungy. But it's still workable, but it will be difficult. And I actually don't necessarily know how much it matters. So let's just add a few things that I normally do and see what we can work with here. I think I'm going to have the same problem you probably did, where I'm going to want to luminance mask this and get the sea out as much as possible with the trees. And I'm going to bring up the shadows. It's going to be difficult. Yep, I'm not hitting everything I need to hit. I think that's... Nope. I think I'm getting grunginess in the water. Yeah. It's tough. I think ultimately what I would probably do for this image, me personally, is I would create a virtual copy. I would bring up my exposure by a decent amount, bring up my shadows, and then I would take that virtual copy and the original copy into Photoshop, and I would luminance mask this area of the trees in if you wanted it. That's pretty much what I would do. I think that it's too hard to use the range mask in Lightroom. It's kind of their limitation, is sometimes you just don't have as much control. But I would overall, I think that's such a high contrast image that that's what you're going to have to do, Luigi. So I hope that helps. I definitely like this crop more, not this specific crop, but a smaller crop like this, where the island is kind of right in the center of the image. And what's cool is you have the balance of the sun, and there's a little bit more weight over here in the bottom left corner. Guys, if you just sent me pictures, I haven't even gotten close to... okay. So, yeah. I haven't even gotten close to working through all the images. Okay. Juan. No. Not Juan. Jean. I think that's who's next. Luigi, if you're still awake, I hope that answers your question. And if you need help with that, using one image to luminosity mask together in Photoshop, I think I did it on my last stream. Or one of my streams. You can always message me if you really want to do it, and I'll try to find it for you. Okay. Let me see who posted. Okay. 3 and 4. Jean, are you still here? Just making sure. Yeah, man, it's a great photo. And you don't need to be... no explanation necessary. Okay. 3 and 4. Let's see. Oh, this is Indonesia Bromo. I can't pronounce it, right? It's the famous inactive volcano, and yeah. I've always wanted to go here. Ilicardi has a shot from here with the star trails. It's really cool. Yeah, Juan, I said your name and I meant Jean. So, one letter off. Okay, yeah, let's take a look at this. I think this is probably the one I will edit. I think that let's just talk about this really quick. I think this image is a little too busy But what you could do, I think, is because a lot of the cool parts of this image are all on the right side. If you really wanted to, I think cropping something like this would work. But I think that this tree over here is too distracting. Mostly because it's not only is it in focus, but it's so large in the frame that it makes me want to look at it. But I really, and no offense, I don't care about it in the image. It doesn't bring, I'd rather, in a perfect world, it not be there, and I would just have this landscape. Hope that explains that one. But let's take a look at your other one, because this is a pretty classic shot, and I love this area. I would love to go. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is crop out a little bit of the sky. Crop in a little bit here, and crop in a little bit here. And I can always readjust that later. All right, Adobe Landscape. It's going to bring up, this looks like blue hour colors. We're having a little touch of the sunrise here. We can make those pop just a little bit more with our saturation slider down here, but not too much because all of the shadows are blue. I'm going to fight that by with the HSL, bring down the blues just a little bit, add in some contrast, and then I definitely want to bring up the shadows just a tad, and that's going to get us to where we need to be. And I always add in, you'll notice that I always add in medium contrast instead of strong, and I always add it in pretty early so that I have an idea of where the image is in terms of natural contrast versus what I'm adding in. You can do it different ways, where you do your basic edit first and then add contrast last. Yeah. Anytime, Luigi. I hope you have a good night, and thank you for staying up. Sorry it took so long to get to your image. I'm going to bring down the sky just a tad, mostly the highlights, because I really want to bring out those colors that are in the sky. That looks pretty good. And I think we're pretty close. Can probably dehaze just a little bit to add more of that micro contrast into the image. It's really going to make these foreground areas pop a little bit. And then something else I'm going to do is zoom way out. And I'm just going to create a big radial filter right in the middle and make sure that it's not inverted. And we're just going to add like a slight vignette to the image. I did this on another one before. It's just going to bring down the whole image just a little bit more. And then I'm going to add, I'm noticing that the clouds in the foreground are just probably a tad too blue, just a tad. So I'm going to warm them up a little bit with a G&D. You want them to be blue because shadow is typically blue, but I don't want them to be super blue, like overly blue. I think that looks pretty good. And then I might crop out, I don't want to crop too much of the right side because of I'm basically balancing 𝐒𝐤𝐚𝐥𝐬 and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, and this mountain peak in the background a little bit. And then I think, looking at my histogram here, I have room to bring up my whites and bring down the blacks. So that means I can create some strong contrast. Okay. Probably bring up the blacks a little bit more. And then in that big radial filter, I'm going to bring up the shadows some to give us a little bit more detail. Nope, not that radial filter. I'm going to make another one, invert it, and reset it, and then bring up the shadows. That's too much. So I'm going to bring up the shadows, and then I'm going to bring up the contrast. That's going to bring the shadows back down, and that's pretty much it. I think that's pretty good. I'm going to full screen it. Yeah, I think that's getting pretty close to what I would do. Let's look at our before and after. All right. That's kind of how I would edit it. Maybe this is definitely one of those images though, Jean, that I would look at and have to walk away from and come back to, because you're dealing with a lot of colors. There's a lot of pastel colors, and you don't want to oversaturate them. I'd probably check it on my phone before ever posting it somewhere. But I think something along these lines is pretty close. I think this is how I would do it. Okay. Hope that answers your question. I'm going to shotgun to the next one. Let's see. Trevor, are you here? And Torch, I haven't even gotten to my inbox if you're still here. I'm sorry. Hans, are you here? Okay. Hans, if you're here, I'll do yours next, and then I'll do Trevor. Let's see if Hans is still here. Okay. Again, thank you guys. I think next time I do this, I'm going to have to do something because I don't want to leave people out, especially if they've been waiting and trying to get me to look at their photos. So I don't really know what the fair thing to do is. I don't know. Okay, what numbers were you? Sorry, Hans, I'm still trying to figure out 47. Okay. Oh, I didn't even bring it up. Sorry. 47 and 48. I think I have your name on here. You're somewhere in here, I think. Is this it? Oh yeah, your last name. Okay. So these two images. Okay. Is one of these an edit and the other the raw? Okay, this is the raw, this is the edit. Okay. So this is a cool photo. I love this like cloud inversion frost look in photos. Let's get to develop tab so I can actually zoom in. I'm going to mention one thing you probably already know, and it's that if only you could move this house like just a little bit to the left, just a tiny bit, would definitely make the compositional elements a lot better. Just because it's so far to the right of the composition. I think you probably already know that though, and it's something you probably fought with, and that's why you cropped it this way. In terms of the actual edit, like what you did, it's very close to what I would do. I don't know if it's in the JPEG that I have or something, but there's some weird coloration I think going on right here. Not sure what's going on there. I think that should probably be different. Let's take a look really quick. Let's just go through. Now I could create a preset to do all this, but I'll be honest and say I've been editing more than I ever have with these streams, so I have not needed one up until this point. So something I really want to do with this particular image is I know that there's some colors in the sky. Okay, I don't want to bring down. So let's go ahead and crop like you had it, because I think if we're deciding that this is the subject, man, this is going to be tough. If that's the subject, we still can't really get it to where we want it. Huh. Wonder if we just forego the thing altogether. No, this is the most interesting part of the photo. Let's see if we can balance the bottom left or bottom right and top left. Okay, so I think this, like you had, the crop that you had is close to what I would do. I might crop out some of the sky like I did. And any preceding stuff, I would just say that I think that I wish the house was like right here in terms of your composition, like if you had just aimed a little bit to the right. However, I have to assume that maybe something on the right-hand side that I can't see because I'm not there was in your way, was distracting, and you were just trying to cut it out. So, light post. Okay. Yep, I just read chat. So, I can gather that based off the photo. So, I think let's just assume that the house is down here. And assuming that, I think this is a fantastic photo. And I really don't think you have to do a whole lot to the photo. I think almost, I would even go like take some saturation down and just make it almost a black and white. Not necessarily, because I really like the tone, those blue tones of the coldness. Sorry, almost 3 hours of talking about photos. Things start to slow down. I really don't think you have to do a whole lot to this photo. Again, something you could do for this to really get your viewer's eye where you want it is to just create a small radial filter like we've been doing, big feather, and just bring down the rest of the exposure in the photo. That might be too strong, but I think you get the idea. Something else I might do is bring down the sky a tiny bit more. And then I'll bring up the whites just a little bit to brighten up basically the whole image since everything is white. And I think that's looking pretty good. I really don't think I would do too much else to this photo. It might be a tad too blue once you export it, so you might want to come in here and bring down the blues and the saturation here just ever so slightly. But I think this is pretty much how I would edit this photo. Again, bearing that the house was right here in the frame. But just to really talk about the composition that I think is really cool is that you have this whole bottom right part of the frame, and then the top left of the frame balances it out. So it's almost as if this section of the photo is exactly the same cutout as this section of the photo if you were to fold them on top of each other. And then you just have this, then you also have this cloud inversion or fog that balances out this mountain. And I think that's really cool. It's almost as if you folded the image on itself, they would like line up. And I think that's really cool. Yeah, the only problem is if we tried to remove the house, well, unless you went into Photoshop, if you try to remove the house, the best part of the image, and I think a lot of where the balance in the image comes from, is on what I just talked about, which is this hillside balancing out the sky part, and this hill balancing out the fog, almost reflecting each other. And I think that's really what makes the image work outside of the house. And to be completely honest, if you could take this into Photoshop and remove the house enough to where you can't see it, I think that's a portfolio-worthy shot in terms of the abstract balance of the composition. Yeah, Mayor, if you've been here, again, I'm sorry I haven't got to your photo. This will be posted to my channel. I don't know if I can get to everybody's photos, and I think I'm going to have to figure out a better way to either do lists or prioritize photos or something, because I feel bad that I can't get to everyone's photos. All right, let me look at who's next from the list of people from Europe. Mayor, I'll do your photo right now. How about that, if you're still here? And then Trevor, I'll try to do yours unless somebody else chimes in. Mayor, I think you said 15 and 16, yeah? '15 and 16. These two photos? Yeah? Okay. All right. So let's talk about these. So this particular photo, again, comes down to what is the subject. And if the subject is a layered photo, for example, let's say the bottom half of the image is these waves crashing on this black sand beach. Where the hell is black sand beach with tropical in the background with mountains? Where is this? Argentina? No, not with that much tropics. You're going to have to be more specific. My GeoGuessr skills are pretty lackluster, apparently. It's just not every day I see black sand beaches with palm trees in the background. All right. So I think I think I could see what you were trying to do here with this image, with the water leading your eye through the image to whatever's up here. The only problem is there's nothing going on up here. I think the bottom half of the image is interesting. You've got some people on the beach here. You've got, again, this part of the waves coming to lead your eye through the image. I just don't think there's anything going on up here that I either can't see, want to see, or, you know. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, I've never heard of that. An island off of Africa. Got it. Well, now that I know that a black sand beach exists where there are palm trees and mountains is really cool, because I thought I knew where all black sand beaches were, pretty much just Iceland and a few other spots in the world. That's really cool. I guess it's a volcanic island then, in some capacity. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much more time on this one. Again, I think that the idea was here, if you really wanted to salvage this photo, I think you'd have to completely crop out the entire top half, turn this to black and white, and do some high contrast kind of image. But even then, even if I include this part, there's nothing going on in the background that my eye is drawn towards. So let's take a look at your other image. I think there's more to work with here. So the first thing I would do here is try to get everything lined up straight, because an image like this, your geometry in the image is absolutely the most important. So I want this middle line to be basically right where the middle line of the image is. You have to give me a second. And I'm probably not going to be able to line everything up perfectly. Really depends on how you took the photo, how everything worked out when you were there. You can also use these tools down here for guided stuff. Where the heck is it? So if I wanted to, the only problem is like guided is going to make the image straight based off these. This is going to look crazy. So if I did that, it's just going to make the image look crazy. But you can use these tools to help balance out the image. So if I needed to switch it a little bit on the left or right plane, horizontal plane, or the vertical plane, you can use that. But I think for time's sake, this is pretty close. Probably crop out this part of the image and just crop out a tiny bit of the left. Something like this. And then what I would do is increase the contrast. I think something that's really going to help this image is darken every part of the image that's not the road. So something like this. And unselect invert. Bring down everything but the road like this. And I think just something like that's really going to make your image pop a little bit more. Let's see. Other than that, I don't think there's a whole lot of like advanced techniques or any techniques that I would use that you need to do anything else with. What you could do is, if you were trying to style this for like Instagram or something, you could come down here and change your color grading stuff. So if I went into the shadows here, maybe added some blue to the shadows, went to the highlights, added some reds maybe. Something like this. Maybe some oranges, sorry. And then went up to my tone curve, brought up my blacks here, and you could create like a really styled image like this. And then I might even bring the rest of the image down even more like this. And I think that looks pretty, just a quick edit, just to give you an idea of what you could do. Oh, it's the Canary Islands. Gotcha. Okay. That's what I would do. I hope that helps guide you in the right direction for what you might want to do to your image. I think again, an image like this is the most important thing is geometry. And then the next biggest tip is just using that giant radio filter to really have your eye look at the road. Matthew, is the email that I put in the down below wrong? It should just be liveedits@alexarmitage.com. So, yeah. Okay. Trevor, I know you're next on my list, I think. Let me see if there's anyone still here trying to go to bed. This is tough, going through this many images. Let's see. All right, Trevor, I'm going to do yours next. And then Kyle, I think. Ralph, I'm going to do yours next. You've been here since the very beginning. 51 to 53. Okay. I'm sorry if you're still waiting around. I don't want to leave anyone out, but I think I have to accept that might be the case sometimes. Ralph, 51 through 53. Okay, you're the only one that sent me a bracketed photo. But I don't necessarily know if I'm going to do a full edit on this. So the first thing I want to say is you're taking it with a Nikon Z6, and your normal exposure has all the data you could possibly want in this image. Taking a look at your histogram, nothing is clipping. Everything is there that I would want to use. So I wouldn't necessarily need these two other exposures. So let's just look at one exposure. And I feel like this is more of a snapshot photo. And I mean that in the way that unless the image is just really flat and I can't tell, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of like interesting lighting on this photo. It's a very flat image. So if you really wanted to edit this photo, I might make it black and white. Let's try to figure out a crop. I feel like this right side is a little distracting. And there's a decent amount of distracting elements in it that we kind of need to hone in. Maybe something like this, because I'm assuming the subject matter is this building in the background. That's my assumption. But like I said, I feel like the lighting in the image is pretty lackluster. Landscape, let's see if we can remove some of that haze in the top part of the image, even though it's pretty blue. Let's bring down the blues. Something else we could do is just, again, I know I've been using this method a lot, but it really just helps bring in the subject to our viewer here. Bring down the rest of the image. Let's see. And then I think maybe black and white might work for this. So I think I want to bring up the exposure of the whole image, and then I'm going to come back in and bring down the exposure of the rest of the image besides these buildings. So something along these lines, I think. And again, I can still see what everything is. Yes, there's a lot of dark areas. I can still see the detail there, and I have a much better idea of what I'm trying to look at here. I know that was a quick and dirty edit, but again, there's just not a lot of interesting light in the photo to begin with. I can see that maybe there's a hit of light right here. I think turning it to black and white really makes it easier to adjust those colors. And I think there's definitely some distracting elements here. If you could have zoomed in more, let's see, you're 24 to 200 and you're at 120. I probably would have zoomed in a little bit more. Mostly because the top half of the image isn't doing a whole lot for me, and the bottom half of the image isn't doing a whole lot for me. Wow, Jean, thank you so much. You did not have to do that. I'm sorry to make anyone wait around. I don't know what the better way to get people to to look at their photos. But thank you so much for the donation. That is awesome. I cannot. And if you guys are still here and you're still watching, I really appreciate the support. And thank you so much. I know I don't really have great responses. A lot of times it just feels weird. I really appreciate it though. Sincerely. Very much appreciated. Get some sleep. And thank you again, John. I really appreciate it. Okay. Ralph, I hope this answered your, I keep saying answered your question. You didn't ask me any questions. I hope this helped your image. Yeah, of course. Okay, Trevor, your turn. Finally. Let's scroll up and figure out what number it is. And if you're still in the chat and you're still waiting for your image, feel free to chime in. Let's see. Trevor, which one was it? Oh, okay, Matthew. Well, if you want, just wait around, send the image for the next time, because I'm about to hit 3 hours. Quite a few people sent me images while I was streaming, and I just don't know if I'll have time to get to them, because honestly, there's just so many people that submitted and people that were joining in, and I apologize. Oh, I just saw your email, Matthew. But if I don't get to your image this time, try to send it in for next time. I apologize if I did not get to your image or haven't. Trevor, I'm still trying to figure out, is your name in here? Is it this person? Is this you, Trevor? Mike, I'll do yours right after 𝐒𝐿𝐢. Let's go back. 30 something or 40 something. These are yours, right? The ones I was just had up? Okay. Okay. I'm glad you're still here because I wanted to talk about this image because I thought it was really cool. And I've never seen this spot before. So this is your edit. The one thing I noticed about your edit that first caught me off guard is it looks like to me that the horizon line is not straight. And that I think the horizon line should be like this. Without trying to cut off the top circle. That looks more correct to me than it did before. But I will admit this is one of those images I might have to sit here and actually really play around with it. I love your edit. I think it's super subtle. I think the colors that you brought back in the image are really nice. Nothing looks oversaturated to me. Nothing is that distracting with what you started with. This little board here maybe is a little distracting, but it looks like you've added enough of vignette on the image to darken it up. And honestly, I think overall with your composition, I think it looks really good. I think the edit that you did is subtle enough, but it's got these colors that make me want to look directly into the image. I don't think I would change a whole lot. Like I said, maybe just adjusting the crop, the level and the horizon line in the image. Whew, my brain is dead. And I would say maybe I'm not even going to say that because I think that because it's leading your eye to the right of the image, having all this space over here is important. Because for example, if I were to do this, it just doesn't feel as powerful to me. You could do that, but I think having the balance over here is good. And this is the kind of photo where you don't have a lot of room to crop because there's just elements in the photo that are really important. Yeah, I think this edit is really cool. Again, I would absolutely make sure your horizon line makes sense. And so I'm actually looking at right here as one of your horizon lines. And then I'm also trying to somewhat balance the horizon line between these two here. So this is actually a great example of where we could probably use the guided tool. So here's a quick tip. So I'm going to click guided. I'm going to select this little line back here and make sure that these are lined up. And then I'm going to select from here to here. Boom. That looks way better to me. I think that fixed it. That distortion that was happening in the image. So that's something you could play around with. Matthew, priority goes to raw files, which are DNGs if you want to set them that way. Hey, Kevin, I'm sorry I didn't get to your image fast enough. But if I do get to it, it'll be on the stream. Apologies if I don't. Okay, so let's take a look at your other one really quick, Trevor. So this is your edit. This one feels way oversaturated. So I'm not going to really comment on the compositional elements. I think I know what you were going for here, where assuming that the dead tree here, or dead, sorry, probably not dead, but leafless brush here is your subject, your left-hand side that's balancing out your right-hand side here. Going along those lines, I think the edit that you sent me is too oversaturated. Whereas on this edit, it feels like the colors and the tonalities are a lot softer, a lot more pastel, and look a lot better. This edit just looks way too pushed to me. But that's pretty much all I would want to say about this photo. I think I could see what you're going for, but it's a very busy photo. And if I'm being completely blunt and honest, I think this is a way better photo. Not only the editing, but just the composition, how you chose to shoot the photo and stuff like that, I think is much better. Okay. Let's see. 𝐒𝐿𝐢 46. And then I've got Mike here at number 1. Mike, I know you've been here for a while. I'm sorry. Okay. 46. Oh yeah, the Burj. So this is cool. I mean, the Burj has been shot to death, so it's always cool to see photos or angles that you don't normally see. And I like... So here's what I would have loved. Now, Derby, if you can go back to this spot, I don't know what the actual scene looks like when you're there, but this shot would be absolutely amazing with exactly what you did here without this magnolia. It looks like a magnolia. No, not whatever this tree is. Not a magnolia tree, but if you can somehow get the layers of, like, so you let's say you shoot even further down, like you squat down a little bit more, try to get this railing out. You have this brush here, but you want to balance. You want to make sure you have this water here, and then you have the skyline in the background. If you can, if you could go back to this spot, which I'm assuming you can, because I think you said you were in the UAE. That is where Dubai is, right? And retake this shot where you have the bottom layer being this grass, and then you have the layer of the water and the skyline in the background. I think it would look absolutely amazing. The way you did take it, I think that this is too distracting. And I don't think it really adds much to the edit. So if you wanted to salvage this, I'm going to crop it as best I can to how I would do it with what we have. Would have to be something like this, but it just doesn't feel wide enough. And I would have to go in and Photoshop out those little parts. I just feel like everything is there for a really layered photo like we talked about earlier. If you were here, we talked about minimalist shots like this, where they're just layers of texture and stuff. But if you could go back and take this shot without this tree in it, but all the other elements like this, I think it would be really cool. So let's assume that's not there, and I'll do a quick edit to see. Although you may, I think this is this edited? You sent me a JPEG, so I'm not sure. Okay. Well, I like your edit. I think it's pretty good. It'll really depend on how hazy it is and the colors in the sky. But if you can take this at blue hour or right at dusk, kind of how these colors are, with the exact same composition, trying to get out try to remove the railing as much as possible, keep the water and this grass in at the same level, and then take a different shot without this tree in it. I think with the skyline in the background, I think it would look really cool. Hey, good night, made up. Sorry I didn't get to your image. I know you had trouble. You sent it to me either while I was streaming or you didn't get it to me, but I appreciate you joining in. Yeah, I know it's really hazy. It's very hard to get a clear day there. Not that I've been there, but I've at least watched enough videos and content from there to know. Okay, Mike, you're up next. And sorry I didn't talk about your particular photo, but I really think that photo could be really cool with how I described it, in my opinion. All right. So, Mike, I think you're the one that sent me this picture, and you said it was all the way from 2008, which is why Nikon D2X would make sense, which is crazy because, you know, I look at this image and you would never be able to tell it's from a camera from 13 years ago. Yeah. Next time, bring a saw and just chop down the tree. Yeah, please don't do that. I'm not suggesting that. So Mike, I think that this photo, I don't remember exactly what you said. I know you were going back through your logs or your catalogs and stuff and trying to see photos that might be worth working on. So this is definitely another layered photo. And what I'm trying to, obviously I think this tree here is the most important aspect. And I'm wondering if we should just get rid of those trees. And just go full on with this tree, something like this. Let's just start from here. It's really interesting. This is an image where, like, I don't even think we need to make it black and white. But you can hit the black and white button if you wanted to. So I'm actually, it's going to be tough because the foreground is super bright. And I want to bring that down a little bit, but I still want it to look bright. But just, yeah, I think I might have to just leave it. It's going to be too hard. Maybe just ever so slightly, just like a touch. And I'm going to use the same tool that I've been using for a lot of things. Big radial filter on the tree. This might look bad because of how bright the image is, but I'm going to try it anyways. Not in love with that. So I can do that, and then what I can do is bring up the whites to compensate. Yeah, that's not too bad. What that's going to do is just add a tiny bit more contrast between the tree and the outer parts of the image. I do think that's what's tough about this is that everything is so bright that it's hard for me to really get an idea of what I should be looking at. So I think that's probably your limitation with this photo. And I don't think that, like, I think it looks good, but I think that the foreground is so bright that it's just difficult to see. So I'm going to try one more thing, and this is just to give you something you could do. Is I'm just going to darken up the whole image. And if you've been here the whole time, you know what I'm about to do. We could just try adding a source of light almost into the image. Now, this is going to kind of make the image a way different. It's going to be more of a, high key, lots of light kind of image. Something along these lines. Let me zoom back in. And it's something you could play with if you wanted to and try something along these lines. I don't necessarily know if this is exactly how I would do it, but if you wanted to add in kind of mimicking light in the scene, I think that's how I would do it in Lightroom. But if I were to go back, delete this, bring the exposure back up, and you wanted more of a flat, neutral scene like this, it's going to be tough to balance the white in the foreground, because as much as I want to darken it, I don't want to make it look too mushy. I think something like that would work. And then probably another one at the top to help balance it out just slightly. Something like this, Mike. I think this looks better than what we started with, which is here. And I think that leaving in this patch of trees out on the right is good. It gives us much more idea of what we want. You might even want to crop in even stronger on the right. But I think that's how I would do it. All right. If you guys are still here, thank you. Okay. Let's see. Who's next? Who's still here that wants me? Brian, 70, I think is next. Yes. Brian, are you still here? And then Kyle. Nope. Kyle first. I think you've been trying to tell me for a while. Sorry, Kyle. Dashes aren't, I don't know what's wrong with the bot, but apparently dashes aren't allowed. I think you said 75 and 76, yeah? I think you wanted me to just critique these. Okay, Brian, I'll get to yours right after this. It just shouldn't take too long. There's not much to say about Kyle's stuff. I think both of these photos are great. I think in this particular photo, the one thing that sticks out to me is there's something going on right here and here that gives like a really grungy feel. Like it's been, the exposure's been brought down too much. And I feel like these little spots right here need to be a little bit brighter. That's pretty much it from this photo. You could also add just like a quick G and D if you wanted in the foreground, which it looks like you probably already did, to just bring it down just a touch more. But I think the things that are distracting me the most are these little spots right here, right there, that look, obviously this is not going to be very good because it's a JPEG I'm editing. They just look too dark. And I would try to balance that a little bit more. This particular image I think is probably, for what you were going for, great. The vignette is really strong, but I think that's always a choice via the photographer. And I know that you have the sky in here because of all of the feeling of the sky. But I wouldn't hate this photo if you did this. Only because as much as I love this would be a great print. So I could print it really big and really get an idea. I think this is almost too much sky. And sometimes I crop an image because I know my subject, all the important stuff is right here, right? So like the stuff I really want to see, all of these pretty colors and the details is right here. But what ends up happening is I crop it so big that stuff is so small on a normal screen someone's looking at. So if I were to post this to Instagram and go 4x5, I would definitely crop it down, get you maybe a tiny bit more in the scene. Something like this. That doesn't look as good. It's going to look weird because your vignette's already on there. But I think something like this, in my opinion, looks better. Oops. That's how I would do this. I think there's plenty of sky in here to give you the idea that that's what's happening. Okay. Brian, you were next. And then Roberto, is that how I say your name? Or is it Redot? I don't know. Some people have usernames. Some people have their names. Yeah, of course. I think your edits are great. I don't think I would do much. The colors in here look really good. They're not too pushed. Your sky looks really balanced. You've got some beautiful fall colors. Like I said, if this is the crop you want because you want all of that sky in there, that's up to you. I will say I think these parts look a little too dark. I'm going to do Brian's next. Brian, let me see what number you were. Somewhere in here. 70. Okay. I'm pretty sure my voice is giving out. Oh, Brian, you sent me this. You said you are new to drone photography, yeah? Or new to photography in general, and you're using a drone, I think, something along those lines. So, really quick, what the important part about something like this is to make sure that the balance between the left side and the right side is strong. So I would probably, you could do something like this if you wanted to, but I want to make sure that the curve here matches a bit of the curve at the top. You could also do something like this as a crop. Personally, that's how I would edit these photos. As your original image, you could even do something like this. I just think that this part curves a little bit too much for me. It's a little distracting to what you're trying to do with the image, which is, my opinion, is like symmetry. So I'd crop like this, and then maybe try to just take your brush here and see if you can get that out. Okay, that was easy. Sometimes it's a little more difficult than that. Let's add some strong contrast in. And we're going to bring up the whites. The reason I'm doing that is because I have a little room to play. Something like this. This is definitely more of you could probably do a black and white shot. Not a whole lot of difference between the color and black and white. The other thing I'm noticing is the left-hand side is warm and the right-hand side is cold. So that's kind of cool. So it's up to you if you want to warm up your image a tad or cool it off a tad. I actually think warming it up here by just a few notches, probably 3, looks pretty good. Yeah, Gregory, it is. This is pretty intense. I didn't want to set a time limit. I wanted to go for as long as I could, try to get to everyone's photos. But it is a lot of talking and a lot of figuring out photos. And I know that I'm repeating a lot of stuff just because that's what's on my mind. So something that you could do that in this, again, I'm just going to talk about like artist expression here that you could do that might be really cool, is you could create a graduated filter here and cool off the right side of the image, keeping the left side of the image, that is not what I wanted to do, more warm. And again, I'm not condoning this as something that you want to do for your images. I'm just saying it's something you could do that kind of really adds more contrast, where this side is more warm and this side is more cool. I think it looks kind of cool, pun intended. But that's something you could do. notice, I think the most important thing to this image is your crop for what you want to do for this style. And you'll notice that I'm trying to put this section of the road to match perfectly with this section in terms of where it goes off of the frame. So you can see the road is going off up here. I probably want to move it to about right there. Oh, that is definitely too much. So it's going to be hard to get this perfect just based off the image, but that is really what I think is most important when balancing it. I'm not going to be able to get it fast enough. That's pretty close. So yeah, Brian, you saw that I could use I just used this tool, the spot removal tool, and it worked really well. You don't have to take it into a lot of times I have to take it into Photoshop to fix that stuff, but yeah, Mazda. I will say every photo is different. Some photos, like we had a photo earlier, I don't know if you're here, that I just saw and I was like, I don't think you need to do anything to the photo. I don't know what else I would do, which is just sometimes how it happens. So giving you that idea with the graduated filters, again, that is a stylistic choice. I wouldn't push it too much. Obviously, if I went like this, it's going to look a little ridiculous, but it's something you can do. You can play around with, and you can really kind of go off of what was already there, which is what I was saying, and that this area is a little bit more blue. This area is a little bit more warm, and you can keep playing off of that if you wanted to. I think overall that this image is pretty close. Something else you could do is maybe darken everything but the road. So there's two ways you could do that. You could do 2 graduated filters. I'm going to do it quick and dirty. I'm just going to create like a super, super long radial filter. And just darken the rest of the image just a little bit like that. Just something like that could be cool. So I think that looks pretty cool overall from what we started with, which was this. But I know you're just getting into photography, new to drone stuff. I think the most important takeaway here, regardless of how colors or how you edit it, is the geometry and how you balance the photo in a photo like this. Okay. Whew. All right. Red dot, redot, redo. I don't know what your name is. I'm going to go with red dot because your icon looks like a red dot, even though I know that's not. You would need 2 D's in your name. You said that my shot is the low sunset wave shot. Can it be next? Low sunset wave shot. Can you give me a number? Yeah, of course, Brian. Is it this one? $23. Did I select the right one? I didn't check the number. Yay. Look at that. I did. Okay. This is a really cool photo. And again, I think this uses negative space really well, especially a portion of the foreground being out of focus really helps draw our attention right into the center of the frame. It uses the negative space in the top and the bottom really well. And it's interesting because, again, composition rules and all that stuff are all subjective to the photo. Because the reality is the only parts of the photo that actually matter, that actually we're really looking at, is right here. But without all this negative space to lead our eye directly into the center of the photo, it doesn't have the same feeling. And I think that's important. So if I were to edit this, I don't think there would be a whole lot I would do to crop. I might come in here and do 4:5 since that might be the setting that I'm going to print to. So I'll just set it to that. Realistically, you could make it a little bit smaller or larger. Let's put the sun right on the horizon there, or the 2/3 line. And yeah, just really quick, probably set it to Adobe Landscape. It's a bit warm, even though I know the image is probably supposed to be this warm. It's a bit warm. So let's bring that down a tad. And I'm going to bring the saturation down a little bit. And then I'm just going to bring the highlights in the sky down a little bit because they're a touch bright. Maybe I want to bring them down a lot. So that's that's interesting. So it's really bright up here, somewhat distracting. And I think bringing some of these tones into the image is kind of cool. So let's actually do that. Don't want to hit the sun too much. Yeah, that looks pretty good. It's a little grungy right here, so I'd have to balance that out a little bit more. But I think overall it's not too bad. And then I'm going to do the same for the foreground because it's also a little bright. So I'm just going to bring down the highlights in not that much. Just a tiny bit, not very much. And again, that's just going to bring our eyes right to the center of the photo. And maybe this could be considered distracting, but I don't think it's that bad. It's pretty small. But in a perfect world, maybe I would just want this wave without this hill in the background. Mazda, I think that it's actually easier for me to crop some of this stuff out when it's not my image and I wasn't there. So like in my images, I'm probably not as cut through it when it comes to, oh, let's just remove this element or let's just get rid of this because I was there or I was trying to make it or I was trying to force it or something like that. So yeah, I think this is looking pretty good. I don't think it needs a whole lot. You might even bring more attention to your eye doing the exact same thing I've done on a lot of photos. It's just adding this natural vignette right here. But then I want to bring the whites back up to kind of bring some brightness back into the photo. Something like this. We could even go black and white. This could look really cool because I think we'll have really good tonal control because we can just adjust our oranges. But we can also adjust the white balance here to change how the image looks and feels. And I don't necessarily mind a black and white here. I don't think it looks too bad. But I think overall this is pretty close to how I would edit it. I think it's a pretty cool photo. I will say it's interesting how orange the image is with no other colors, but I'm assuming that's because of this haze that's in the sky. It's almost creating an early sunset, whereas normally we wouldn't get these colors until the sun was down here and it was creating those reds. But because of the haze, the sun is kind of being blocked and it's giving us a little bit of that diffused light. Your edit was totally different? Well, I would love to see it because maybe it's better than mine. So feel free to send it on Instagram or something and I'll check it out. But I think overall this is pretty close. And yeah, welcome back, Roberto. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if you went to bed and woke up and I'm still streaming. Okay. I think that I've gotten through most people's photos that are still here. So if you are here and I haven't looked at your photo, feel free to chime in. I know a few people sent me photos while I was streaming. I think next time around, I probably just need to remove that from the link and not allow that option because it's very difficult for me to midstream download people's photos, put them into my Lightroom, make sure the name is right, and make sure everything looks good. Oh, Juan, you're still here. 24. Okay, I can do that. Oh, yeah, I know that you sent me this. Okay, so your original image is really cool. I think that your edit is too much for me. It's got that really grungy HDR look, and that is not a style that I like. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not a style you can make if that's what you want to make, but I feel like the colors are just too pushed. I feel like this foreground you could have left darker. It doesn't need to be this bright. Brighten it up enough so that I can see that they're rocks, and if I really want to look, I can see some detail in them, but they don't need to. It doesn't need to be that bright. So if I were to edit this really quick, I'm going to crop pretty much the same way you did to get rid of the pano here. I'm going to fix my horizon line just ever so slightly. And instead of brightening the whole image, I'm going to do basically like a reverse vignette and brighten the center part of the image like this. Doesn't look too bad to me. Bring down the highlights. And I think you sent me a TIFF, so I can't change the color balance as much as I would like. That's okay. I'm going to bump up the blue saturation, and then I'm going to really pull down the blues. So pull down the blue saturation to balance that out. And see what dehaze does a little bit. Nope, too much. I'm going to just ever so slightly dehaze, bring saturation down by about 10. Strong contrast. This area is looking a little dark. So let's make sure that the radial filter I added is hitting that area enough. Yeah, it is. So let's try to balance that out a little bit. So I'm going to use a G&D. And I'm just going to bring up the shadows slightly. And then I'm going to try to balance it. So this is probably close to how I would edit this photo. Like I said, I think that this is too translucent to in my face. This is not the style of editing that I typically go with, where the greens look like they're neon almost. But if that's how you want to edit your photos, I mean, by all means, go for it. I like a more subtle where I can tell what this is down here, but it's not necessarily taking my eye away from what I assume is the subject, which is kind of the city and these mountains in the background. And to me, that's more important. Something else we could do if we wanted to is kind of crop left and right just a little bit. But that'll depend on how big you want the panorama to be, something along those lines. And you could get a little bit more intricate here, like if I wanted to add another radial filter here to bring down the highlights of just this mountain, you could do that. You just have to be careful because it's going to create that halo right there. So you just got to be careful of that. But yeah. Kevin, I'll take a look at yours next. What do you remember what number it is? Yeah, I think that this is what I would do to figure out what you enjoy is find photos that you like from other people, compare your photo to theirs, and see if it matches. If it does, that means you're doing something right. But if it doesn't, then try to go back to the drawing board and figure out what's going on with the photo. I will say the major issue you have with this photo is that there's just no light in the valley. The light is up here. That means that any of the light that's down here that you're going to have to either replicate or fix or bring up is what you're going to have to create, right? So like you would have to put a light or paint in a light or something to actually add light down there. Yeah, of course, one. Okay, Kevin, I'll go to the list right now. You can tell me. I'm sure I have your name in here. Let's see. I don't know if you sent me your name or you sent me a Instagram. I'll just let you pick. Here, there you go. If you're still here, all 30 people, thank you for joining in. Thank you for taking the time to watch. I'm exhausted. I think I'm gonna have to cut these a little shorter next time. I was like, all right, we're just gonna edit as many as we can until people just stop watching. So yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, Juan. All I meant with the TIFF is that I can't adjust the raw color balance. 41. Okay. Oh, you just wanted this critiqued, right, Kevin? Thank you, Trevor. Kevin, after this or Jerby's, I might, that might be it. We'll just hang out for a little bit and see. Yeah. Okay. Critique-wise, in terms of your edit, this is in my opinion, it's a great photo. So all the elements are there for what I'm assuming you were trying to do. I think the only things that would really make this photo better is if it was sunrise or sunset colors. And that's just what I mean by that is that the clouds and stuff would just have more of that special sunrise or sunset color. I do think, personally, the one thing I'm noticing as I'm talking about it, now this is really dependent on the crop you want. Obviously I know you have the tree here right on the rule of thirds line, but there's not a whole lot to balance it out over here. So if you wanted to, something like this could also be a possibility, something you might have played with. I don't mind this at all either. And the only reason I'm suggesting that is typically when you have something on the rule of thirds line, or that's your subject, you want something to balance it out on the other half of the image. And to me, there's really nothing going on over here that's balancing it out necessarily. And that's why I kind of just quickly just put it right in the middle, because then you don't need to balance it. It is the center of the picture, and you have this reflection down here. I have a photo like this, very similar with all the mountains in the background. That is a good example. Let's see if I can find it. So this photo is very similar, reflection, and I put it dead center because I had nothing else to balance it out with, right? So I just want it right in the center of the frame, reflection in the foreground, and that's kind of what's going on here. And you have these really nice mountains in the background. And personally speaking, I think that if I were to have this image, I would crop it like this. And I would crop it like this if I want it for my desktop background, but I would definitely crop it like this for photography reasons. There you go, Kevin. Gregory, you don't have to, no one needs to donate. It's okay. I made my goal, which was far more than I expected, and very appreciative. Yeah, I think your edit is great. It's really subtle. Like I said, I would crop it like this, and if I were to try to make it, if I wanted it any better, like let's say it's me, and I'm like, how can I make this photo better? It would just be during sunrise or sunset hours. All right, Jerby, you said, let's see, 26 or 36. Okay. 26 or 36. Let me look at 36. Okay. So neither of these photos scream to me like they have like a, well, let me look before I say anything, because maybe there's some detail behind here in the highlights. Nope. This could be a cool black and white, I think. I'm just going to really quickly do this. If you can somehow get the sky in the background to not be completely blown out, but I think it is completely blown out. So it would have to be something like this, but I think that's the only way I would do it is a black and white. Overall, I think the composition could be interesting, but I really need to see the bottom of the tree for something like this to work, I think. Okay, 36. And if I were to edit this, again, my subject is a little bit too far to the left. I'd probably either do this, which is going to fall under the same issue as the last photo, where there's nothing on the right side to really balance it out. But it kind of works. So you could do it like this, or you could just put it right in the middle of the frame, have the reflections, have those nice sand dunes in the back, add some contrast in, bring down the highlights, fight the blues because they're a little bit too blue right now. So bring those down. Could even do black and white for this. Oh, that looks actually pretty cool. Mess with the white balance. So I'm going to make it really blue and then bring down the blues. So this could be a really cool black and white as well. What does it look like when I don't crop? Something like this. That's not bad. Hope that answers your question. I can't go through the whole edit. 'Cause some of these would take longer than 10 or 15 minutes to really hone in, but when are you talking about this one? This one? or the other one? Anytime, Jerby. Anytime. I think if I were to post this myself, I would try to crop something like this. Obviously not with that much blue. But if you have the actual raw file, since you sent me the JPEG, you can mess around with the color temp in black and white. I talk about it in one of my most recent videos. Okay. Whew. We made it through most of the photos that people were here for. So if you're here and you want me to look at your photo, feel free. I'm going to look at a few photos of people that sent me stuff that aren't here. But legitimately, I think my voice is going out. Someone sent me 2 photos for critique that I wanted to talk about that were really nice. Jermaine Steinberg sent me 2. It's this one and where the heck did it go? Okay, I'll just do it without the metadata. So he sent me that photo and I believe this photo. So this photo I thought was really cool. Super contrasty. Oh, I need to cough. Okay, so he sent me 2 edits, and if he happens to watch this, I think this photo is fantastic. There are 2 things that I would do differently personally, and obviously having the lightning in the background is really cool. But there's one thing I noticed on both of your edits, Jermaine, is, now I don't know if your name is, I'm not even going to try, just bear with me, is that your blend here is a bit off. So 2 things I'm noticing is that I think you probably exposure blended 2 different photos. There's a halo not only on the lines here, but also there's a halo right on the outside of your blend. That is something I would try to fix. It can be very tedious and difficult. It's something I still struggle with on any photo I'm trying to blend. And the only other thing on this particular photo is I don't think I would have the rock this exposed. I would have a tiny bit more darkness in the rock. And that will not only help with the photo overall, it'll also help with your blend. The other photo was, where the heck did it go? Let's go back to this view. The other photo he sent is this one. And the same can be said for this one. Personally, I think the elements are all there. Great composition. You've got a foreground element, leading lines through the image. I just think the greens are a bit too translucent for me. And again, you have some haloing around your exposures here. I would try to fix that. It might not be obvious when you're looking on like Instagram, but if I'm gonna pixel peep and look actually at your full photo, those are the kind of things I look for in these kind of photos. Yeah. So a lot of the times people have those halos in their photos. I see them all the time on Instagram when I'm really looking for them. But for the most part, 1, the average person's just scrolling through Instagram is never going to see it. And 2, the images are consumed so tiny that you don't see them that often. But for me, when I edit my photos, like for example, this photo or this photo, I had to do all those types of blends. I get really specific because I know that if I ever print this photo, all of those details show up when you print. And you just have to be extra cautious there. So those are the kind of things you're not going to see unless I'm in Lightroom zooming in and I really point them out, but definitely something to look for. Okay. There was one other photo I just wanted to point out because I thought it was really cool. Hawk, if you're still here, I think you sent this and I thought this was cool. Pretty metal. I think this is a really cool photo. I don't know how I would edit it. Not a wildlife photographer, but I thought it was a cool photo. So I think I am going to call it there. I tried to look at many photos as I could. 𝐒𝐤𝐤𝐚𝐥𝐬, I know you're not here anymore, so I'll take a look at your photos and make some comments. You sent me the unedited versus edited. I like your edit. Something to pay attention to here is it's happening in the background. Notice this almost weird, I don't know how to describe it, but it's this dark ridge versus a bright, God, I'm blanking, highlights here, and it creates almost like a grungy look. Got to be careful with that just because it creates a weird look, in my opinion, when you're trying to have like a mountain range on a sunset or sunrise. So something to pay attention to there, in my opinion. Overall, I think that this image is nice, but I feel like it does lack a where am I supposed to look? What am I looking at? It's a little busy overall. So if you happen to catch this post-stream, that's what I would change about this image. I think your edit is good. It could be a little, like I like how you touched on the colors here, and the colors are looking, that's too zoomed in. The hints of light, the touches of light here on the tree is really nice, but I would just be really extra cautious with this dark area on your mountains. That's the first thing I see in this image. Yeah, Jawad, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but I'm definitely going to make an episode about printing. I think all photographers have made an episode about printing, so it's not like it's going to be anything new, but I do think it's super important, and I hope I can add some kind of twist to it that is helpful. Yeah, I can't believe I got through so many either, Trevor. I must have gone through 30 photos at least. Okay. If you guys have any questions or any comments or anything like that, feel free to... Oh, that's weird. You didn't post a link. I don't know why it removed your message, Trevor. I got to fix the bot. The problem is the very first time I streamed, I think YouTube suggested my channel or something, and a bunch of random people came in and just started talking about like crazy stuff. And I didn't have any bot enabled. So then I enabled this bot, and like it's super overzealous. So apologies for that. But I'm going to wait for just a few more minutes. If you guys have any more questions, you want to donate to the stream, I don't know, anything, doesn't really matter. Feel free. I'll be here for a few more minutes before I turn the stream off. Yeah, my next stream, as long as I still have my voice, will be Wednesday, and we'll just be chilling. It'll be shorter, and we'll just be going through some of my photos, talking about them. I don't necessarily have any plans for it yet. I don't know what I'm going to do specifically, but Wednesday is my normal streaming day. I'll put that stream up later tonight, so you'll know when it is. Should be around the same time as this stream. Anytime, Mazda. Have a good night. I have not... on YouTube, the only videos that I've done that are specifically quite in Photoshop are the exposure, blend, and focus stacking videos. There's 2 of them, part 1 and part 2. Yeah, Adam, I'm still here. Don't ask me how. Almost 4 hours, so... Mona, I would do a test print first. I would just figure out what aspect ratio you want. Let's say your final version, you want to print 20 by 30 inches, which I know you probably use centimeters, but I know inches for my friends. So 20 by 30 is pretty big. I would just print a small test print of like 4 by 6 or 8 by 12, and that'll really give you an idea of like how dark things are or how bright things are and where you need to bring stuff up. And then once you finalize your test print, then make it bigger. Yeah, megapixels isn't necessarily a big deal in terms of print. I mean, unless you're realistically, you can work with pretty small megapixels and still print pretty big overall. Hey, thanks for coming, Gregory. Hey, Kelly, thank you too. Mike, thank you. Thank you, guys. Jawad, thank you for coming. Good night. Hey, Patty, thank you. Yeah, Simon. Those two videos are definitely more advanced stuff. But I don't think they're like too hard as long as you just take it slow. And one is about focus stacking. So if your image doesn't involve focus stacking, you can just do exposure blending, which requires multiple exposures of that shot. However, I believe on one of my last streams, it's the stream where I edited. Here, I'll bring it up. It's the stream where I edited this photo, and I think it's I believe it's the back. Here, let me get back. Where I edited this photo, I believe it's the thumbnail for the video. In that video, I take this image into Photoshop and edit it. And then I also, there's another, I'm trying to remember what photo it was. Sorry, I'm blanking. I believe there was a point on the stream, one of the streams, where I used the same exposure and exposure blended in Photoshop, but I can't remember what photo it is. Message me on Instagram if you really want to know, and I'll find it for you. Patty, I've not done that yet, but a lot of people have suggested organizing and keeping things organized and stuff like that. So I'll probably eventually do a video like that. But I have a lot of stuff in the pipeline in terms of like what I want to do, but it is something I want to work on. Yeah, there was one edit I did where I took the same exposure and blended it together in Photoshop. And that basically shows you exactly what you need to know for exposure blending if you're going to take it into Photoshop. Mike, I'll do on-screen and printer calibration. I'll handle that as well, yeah. Good night, Redot. Good night, Jerby. Anytime, Simon. Just, if you can't find it, message me and I'll find it for you. All right, guys. Thank you for joining. If you have any last minute questions, feel free to ask right now. I appreciate all the support. I hope you got to see your photo on here. Apologies if you did not. I had to go through quite a lot, and I need to figure out a better way to prioritize photos for the next session, because I genuinely feel bad that if someone's waiting around for an hour or two to see their photo. So maybe I'll post a poll, I don't know, something where people can respond with ideas. I'm not necessarily sure what the best way to handle something like that is. So. All right, guys and girls, thank you for joining in. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again on Wednesday if you join in. It'll likely be a shorter stream, just chilling, hanging out. So hope to see you there. Good to hear, Patty. Thank you for joining in. See you guys again on the next one. Thank you again for joining.